I'm Rosalyn Williams, 35, a successful pediatric nurse who spent years caring for other people's children while my own dreams of motherhood seemed to slip away. When I finally announced my pregnancy to my family, my sister Claire's cruel laughter echoed through the dining room. "You're too old, Ross. This is embarrassing." But her husband David pulled me aside afterward, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read. "Don't listen to her," he whispered urgently. "There's something you need to know about why she really doesn't want you to have this baby." What he revealed next would shatter everything I thought I knew about my sister, my family, and the secret that had been poisoning our relationship for decades. The truth wasn't just about jealousy, it was about a lie that had shaped both our lives, and a betrayal so deep it would change everything. If you've ever felt dismissed by those closest to you, stay with me. This story is about finding your voice when everyone tries to silence it. Asterisk. The drive home from my parents' house felt endless, David's words echoing in my mind like a broken record. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white against the black leather, trying to process what had just happened. Claire's laughter still rang in my ears, sharp, cutting, designed to wound. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the darkness for a moment, staring at the small ranch house I'd bought 3 years ago. It had seemed perfect then, with its extra bedroom that I'd secretly hoped would become a nursery someday. Now, at 35, that dream had finally become reality, but the joy felt tainted by my sister's cruelty. Inside, I walked straight to my bedroom dresser and pulled out the old shoebox I kept tucked away in the bottom drawer. My fingers trembled as I lifted the faded family photograph from our childhood. Claire and me, maybe 8 and 6 years old, standing in front of our childhood home's rose garden. Even then, the difference was visible. Claire stood front and center, her smile radiant, our mother's hands resting protectively on her shoulders. I was slightly behind, partially in shadow, with an uncertain smile that never quite reached my eyes. I had always been the responsible one, the helper, the one who took care of everyone else. While Claire was encouraged to pursue dance classes and art lessons, I was praised for helping Mom with household chores and looking after elderly neighbors. Rosalyn has such a caring heart, people would say, as if it were my defining characteristic rather than a choice. When I chose nursing, specifically pediatric nursing, everyone nodded approvingly. "It's perfect for you," they said. "You're so natural with children." What they didn't know was how my heart broke a little each shift, holding other people's babies, comforting other people's children, while my own arms remained empty year after year. The fertility struggles had been private, battles fought in sterile medical offices and through countless tears in my car after negative pregnancy tests. I'd endured 3 years of treatments, hormone injections that made me feel like a stranger in my own body, and the well-meaning but painful advice from friends and family to just relax or stop trying so hard. When I finally stopped the treatments last year, accepting that maybe motherhood wasn't meant for me, I focused on my career instead. I took on additional training, worked extra shifts, and threw myself into caring for the tiniest patients in an ICU. It was there, surrounded by miracles wrapped in blankets, that I found a different kind of peace. The pregnancy had been a complete surprise. At 35, after years of trying and failing, I had assumed my body simply couldn't sustain a pregnancy. When I missed my period, I attributed it to stress. When the nausea started, I thought I was coming down with something. It wasn't until my colleague Sarah mentioned that I looked different, glowing. She said that I even considered the possibility. The positive pregnancy test had been sitting on my bathroom counter for 2 weeks before I finally believed it. I took 4 more tests, scheduled blood work, and then an ultrasound before I dared to hope. At 8 weeks, hearing that strong, rapid heartbeat for the first time, I had cried tears of pure joy in the darkened examination room. I had planned to tell my family differently. I'd imagined a quiet moment with my parents, maybe sharing the sonogram photo over coffee. Instead, the words had tumbled out during dessert, my excitement overriding my usual caution. I should have known better. I should have remembered that in our family, Claire always came first. Looking at the photograph now, I could see the pattern that had shaped our entire relationship. Claire was the star. I was the supporting cast. She was the one destined for marriage, motherhood, and all the traditional milestones our mother valued. I was the spinster sister, useful for babysitting duties and emergency childcare, but never quite worthy of the same dreams. But something felt different this time. Maybe it was the hormones, or maybe it was finally reaching an age where I understood my own worth, but Claire's words hadn't devastated me the way they might have in the past. They had hurt, certainly, but underneath the pain was something else, a fierce protectiveness for the life growing inside. Me and a growing awareness that I didn't have to accept their narrative anymore. David's warning lingered in my thoughts. What could he possibly know that would change everything? And why now, after all these years, was he finally ready to speak up? The call came 2 days later while I was finishing my shift at the hospital. David's voice was tight with tension when I answered. "Ross, can we meet? There's something I need to show you." "Something Claire doesn't know," I kept. We arranged to meet at the small cafe near the hospital, a place where we could talk without running into family members. I found him already seated in a corner booth, his usually neat appearance disheveled, stress lines etched deeply around his eyes. He'd always been the steady one in their marriage, the calm counterpoint to Claire's dramatic tendencies. "I've been carrying this secret for too long," he said without preamble, sliding a small plastic bag across the table. Inside was a faded hospital bracelet, the kind they put on newborns. The ink was smeared with age, but I could still make out a date, November 15th, 1988. "That's Claire's birthday," I said, confused. "But why do you have her hospital bracelet?" David's hands trembled as he reached for his coffee. "It's not Claire's, Ross. It's from the baby we lost, our first baby." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What baby?" "David, what are you talking about?" He took a shaky breath. "Claire was pregnant when we first got married 5 years ago. She was so excited, so sure that this was her moment to finally have what she'd always wanted. She bought baby clothes, started planning the nursery, told everyone at work. The pregnancy seemed perfect until his voice broke. We lost the baby at 22 weeks. It was a little girl. Claire held her for hours, wouldn't let the nurses take her away. They gave us this bracelet as a keepsake, but Claire couldn't bear to look at it. She made me promise to throw it away, but I couldn't. I kept it in my desk drawer at work. My heart ached for them both, but confusion clouded my sympathy. "David, I'm so sorry. But why didn't anyone tell me? Why has this been a secret?" "Because it wasn't the first time." His voice was barely a whisper. "Claire has had 5 miscarriages, Ross. 5. The first one happened just 6 months after we got married. She was devastated, but she was sure it was just bad luck. Then it happened again and again." I stared at him, trying to process this information. Claire, who had always seemed so confident, so entitled to everything she wanted, had been suffering in silence for years. After the 3rd loss, she started seeing specialists. Fertility doctors, reproductive endocrinologists, anyone who might have answers. They ran every test imaginable. Her hormone levels, her uterine lining, genetic screenings, everything came back normal. The doctors kept saying there was no medical reason she couldn't carry a baby to term. David pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of Claire sleeping in a hospital bed, her face puffy from crying, her hands protectively cradled over her still flat stomach. This was after the 4th miscarriage, 18 months ago. She was only 7 weeks along that time, but she was already planning names, looking at cribs online. When we lost that baby too, something broke inside her. The pieces were starting to fit together, creating a picture I had never imagined. Is that why she's been so distant? Why she stopped coming to family gatherings unless it was mandatory? She couldn't bear to be around other people's children anymore. Every baby announcement felt like a personal attack. When your cousin Emma had her twins last year, Claire locked herself in the bathroom and cried for an hour. David's eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion. She made me promise not to tell anyone, especially not your parents. She said she couldn't handle their disappointment on top of everything else. I thought about all the times my mother had made casual comments about when Claire and David would give her grandchildren, how Claire would just smile tightly and change the subject. I had assumed she was just being selfish, wanting to focus on her career first. The worst part, David continued, is how she's convinced herself that she's being punished for something. She keeps saying that other women who don't even want children get pregnant accidentally, while she, who has wanted to be a mother since she was a little girl, can't even keep a pregnancy past the first trimester. David, this is heartbreaking, but I still don't understand why you're telling me this now. What does this have to do with what you said at dinner? He was quiet for a long moment, staring down at the hospital bracelet. When he looked up, his expression was pained. Because when you announced your pregnancy, something shifted in Claire. I've never seen her look so angry, he searched for the word, so betrayed. She spent the entire drive home ranting about how unfair it was, how you don't even really want children, how you've never even been in a serious relationship. The words stung, even coming from David as a report rather than his own opinion. She said that. She said worse things, Ross, things I can't repeat because they would destroy what's left of your relationship forever. He leaned forward, his voice urgent. But here's what you need to understand. Claire's anger isn't really about you. It's about a belief she's held her entire life, something your mother told her when we first started trying to have children. I felt a chill run down my spine. What did my mother tell her? David's words came out in a rush, as if he'd been holding them back for too long. She told Claire that biological children were more important than adopted ones, that blood relationships were stronger, more meaningful. She said that Claire, as the real daughter, had a responsibility to carry on the family line because he stopped abruptly, his face going pale. Because I what, David? He closed his eyes, looking like a man who had just realized he'd stepped off a cliff. Because you're adopted, Ross, and apparently I'm the only one who thought you already knew. The world seemed to tilt sideways. I gripped the edge of the table, my vision blurring as David's words echoed in my mind. Adopted. The word felt foreign, impossible, like he was speaking about someone else entirely. That's not, I started, then stopped. My throat felt like it was closing. That can't be true. You're mistaken. David's face was stricken with regret. Russ, I'm so sorry. I assumed you knew. The way Claire talks about it, the things your mother has said over the years, I thought it was just something your family didn't discuss openly. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Several other patrons looked over, but I didn't care. I need to go. But I didn't know what I needed to do. Go home? Confront my parents? Pretend this conversation never happened? Wait, please. David reached for my hand. Let me drive you home. You're in shock. I'm fine, I lied, fumbling for my keys. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped them twice. David quietly picked them up and guided me to his car. The drive to my house passed in a blur. David kept glancing at me with concern, but I stared straight ahead, trying to process this impossible information. How could I be adopted and not know it? Wouldn't there have been papers, legal documents, something? Tell me everything, I said once we were sitting in my living room. Every conversation, every comment. I need to understand how this is possible. David ran his hands through his hair. It started about 3 years ago, when Claire and I first began trying seriously. Your mother pulled her aside after a family dinner and told her she was counting on her to give the family its first biological grandchild. Claire asked what she meant, and your mother explained that while you were loved and cherished, you weren't technically a Williams by blood. My mind raced through memories, searching for clues I might have missed. The family photos where I looked slightly different, the way relatives sometimes commented that I didn't look like anyone in particular, the way my mother would sometimes seem surprised by my interests or personality traits. Your mother said you were adopted as an infant, David continued. She and your father had been trying to have children for years before Claire was born. When they finally got pregnant with Claire, they were overjoyed, but they'd already fallen in love with you. They decided to keep both children and never told you about the adoption because they wanted you to feel like you belonged. But how's that even legal? Don't adopted children have rights to know their origins? The adoption was arranged privately through a lawyer. This was the early 90s. Things were different then. Your adoptive parents' names are on your birth certificate as if they were your biological parents. It's completely legal, but ethically, he shrugged helplessly. I got up and walked to my kitchen, needing something to do with my hands. I filled the kettle and put it on the stove, going through the motions of making tea while my world crumbled around me. What else did my mother tell Claire? David followed me, leaning against the doorframe. She said that your birth mother was very young, unmarried, and from a difficult situation. She chose to place you for adoption because she wanted you to have opportunities she couldn't provide. Your adoptive parents were told very little about her, but they knew she was intelligent and came from a family with medical professionals that stopped me cold. Medical professionals? Your mother mentioned that your natural inclination toward nursing might have come from your birth family. She seemed to think it was genetic. I laughed bitterly. So even my career choice isn't really mine. It's just biology asserting itself. That's not fair, and you know it. Biology might influence aptitude, but you chose to dedicate your life to caring for children. That comes from your heart, not your genes. The kettle whistled, and I mechanically prepared 2 cups of tea. My hands had stopped shaking, replaced by an odd numbness that felt almost worse than the initial shock. There's more, isn't there? I asked, settling back into my chair. You didn't just tell me this to explain Claire's behavior. There's something else. David nodded reluctantly. Last week, when Claire's period was late, she took a pregnancy test. When it came back negative, she had what I can only describe as a complete breakdown. She was screaming about how unfair everything was, how the universe was playing some cosmic joke on her. Then she said something that chilled me to the bone. I waited, dreading what was coming next. She said that maybe she was being punished for knowing the truth about you, for keeping the family secret all these years. She said that maybe she should just tell you the truth and see how you liked feeling like you didn't belong anywhere. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Not just the threat to reveal my adoption, but the implication that I had somehow been living a lie, taking up space that didn't rightfully belong to me. Is that why you warned me at dinner? You thought she might tell me out of spite? I was, terrified she would blurt it out in front of everyone, in the worst possible way. When you announced your pregnancy and I saw the look in her eyes, he shuddered. I knew I had to get to you first, to find a way to tell you gently. But I never imagined you didn't already know. I sipped my tea, trying to organize my racing thoughts. David, can I ask you something honestly? Do you think my parents love me less because I'm adopted? He was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. I think they love you differently. Your mother, especially, has always seemed to see you as someone she needed to protect and guide, while she saw Claire as someone she needed to prepare for the world. It's subtle, but it's been there in every interaction I've witnessed. And my father, your father adores you. I've never doubted that. But he's also always deferred to your mother when it comes to family decisions. If she wanted to keep the adoption secret, he would have gone along with it. I set down my cup, surprised to find I'd finished the entire thing without tasting it. I need to see proof. Documents, records, something concrete. I can't just take everyone's word for this. David reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I thought you might say that. I went by your parents' house yesterday while they were at work. I remembered Claire mentioning once that your mother kept important documents in a filing cabinet in the basement. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. It was a copy of adoption paperwork, dated November 1989, when I would have been 6 months old. My biological mother was listed as Mary Catherine Donovan, age 17. The father's name was blank. Under reason for placement, someone had written, unable to provide adequate care due to age and circumstances. 17. My birth mother had been just 17 when she made the impossible decision to give me away. Younger than some of my patients' parents, barely more than a child herself. There's more, David said gently, pulling out a small manila envelope. I found this taped to the back of the adoption papers. Inside were 3 letters written in careful script on pale blue stationery. The first one was dated 2 weeks after my birth. Dear baby girl, it began. I don't even know what name your new parents will give you, but I wanted you to know that I loved you from the moment I felt you move inside me. I'm only 17, and I know I can't give you the life you deserve. Your adoptive parents seem wonderful. They already love you so much, and they can provide things I never could. Please don't think I'm giving you away because I don't want you. I'm giving you away because I want everything for you. I couldn't read any further through my tears. This young woman, barely out of childhood herself, had written to me with such love and sacrifice in every word. She had wanted me to know that her choice came from love, not rejection. Ross, David said softly, there's something else you need to know. Something that might explain why Claire's reaction was so extreme. I looked up at him through my tears, wondering what else could possibly shake the foundations of everything I thought I knew. The date on those adoption papers? Look at it carefully. Studied the document again, and slowly the significance dawned on me. November 1989. Claire's birthday was November 1988. We weren't 2 years apart as I'd always believed. We were barely 10 months apart, which meant my parents had brought me home as an infant just months before Claire was born. They had been preparing for one baby and ended up with 2 10 months apart. No wonder my mother had seemed overwhelmed during my early childhood. Wonder I had always felt like I was competing for attention and never quite measuring up, but it also meant something else, something that cut even deeper. My parents had chosen to adopt me while my mother was already pregnant with Claire. They had made a commitment to me before they knew their biological child would be born healthy and whole. That should have been comforting, but instead it raised new questions. Why had they hidden this from me? And why had they allowed Claire to grow up knowing she was the real daughter while keeping me in the dark about my own origins? That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through my house like a ghost, seeing everything with new eyes. The family photos on my mantelpiece suddenly looked different, staged, careful, as if everyone knew something I didn't. I found myself studying my face in the bathroom mirror, searching for features that clearly didn't belong to the Williams family. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I needed answers, and I knew where to find them. In my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, there was a cedar chest filled with mementos from my youth. If there were more clues about my adoption, they would be there. I waited until I knew both. My parents would be at work, then used my key to let myself into the house where I'd grown up. The familiar smell of my mother's lavender potpourri and my father's pipe tobacco usually comforted me. But today it felt suffocating, like breathing in lies. The cedar chest sat at the foot of what had been my bed, now converted into my mother's. Sewing room. I lifted the heavy lid, releasing the scent of cedar and old memories. On top were my high school yearbooks and graduation photos. Underneath were birthday cards spanning decades. I pulled out handfuls of cards, spreading them across the bed in chronological order. The pattern was immediately obvious and heartbreaking. Claire's birthday cards were elaborate affairs, multiple cards from different relatives, expensive gifts, lengthy handwritten messages about how special and wonderful she was. Mine were simpler, fewer in number, with messages that emphasized my helpfulness and sweet nature rather than my inherent worth. From Grandma Helen, Claire's 8th birthday, to my brilliant granddaughter on her special day. You're going to do amazing things in this world. The sky's the limit. From the same grandmother, my 8th birthday, to sweet Rosalyn, thank you for always being such a good helper. You have such a caring heart. Even as a child, I was being defined by what I could do for others rather than who I was as a person. Claire was celebrated for her potential. I was appreciated for my service. I found my baby book tucked beneath a stack of school reports. Claire's baby book, which I'd seen many times, was thick with photos, detailed records of her first words, and steps, locks of hair from her first haircut. Mine was noticeably thinner, with gaps where information should have been, under birth weight and birth length. Someone had carefully written in different ink from the rest of the entries, 7 pounds 3 ounces and 19 inches. The handwriting looked like my mother's, but the dates didn't match. According to this book, I was born on November 15th, 1989, the same day on the hospital bracelet David had shown me, but I remembered celebrating my birthday on November 15th, 1988. My birth certificate, which I'd seen when applying for my passport, listed 1988 as my birth year. Someone had falsified documents to make me appear older than I was, closer in age to Claire. Deeper in the chest, I found a manila folder labeled Important Documents and my father's precise handwriting. Inside were report cards, vaccination records, and at the very bottom, a small white envelope with "For Rosalyn" written across the front in unfamiliar handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a folded letter and a small silver locket. The letter was from my birth mother, written when I turned 18. My dear daughter, it began. Today you turn 18, and I wonder if you even know I exist. I gave your adoptive parents this letter and locket when you were born, with instructions to give them to you when you became an adult. I hope they have honored that request. I looked at the locket more closely. It was tarnished with age, but when I pressed the clasp, it opened to reveal a tiny photograph of a young woman holding a newborn baby. The woman looked impossibly young, with kind eyes and a sad smile. She was holding the baby me with such tenderness that it brought tears to my eyes. I want you to know that I think about you every day, the letter continued. I wonder if you inherited my love of books, if you bite your lip when you're thinking like I do, if you have my stubborn streak that drives everyone crazy. I hope your life has been filled with love and opportunities, and I hope that someday, if you want to find me, you'll know that I never stopped loving you. The letter was signed, Your First Mother, Mary Catherine Donovan, with a phone number and address in Portland, Oregon. I clutched the locket to my chest, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I'd discovered. My birth mother had wanted me to know about her when I turned 18. That was 17 years ago. For 17 years, this letter had been sitting in a chest, waiting for me to find it by accident. I heard a car in the driveway and quickly stuffed everything back into the chest, keeping only the locket and letter. I slipped out the back door just as my mother's car pulled into the garage. That evening, I drove to Claire and David's house. I needed to confront my sister, to understand how she had lived with this knowledge. All our lives while watching me struggle to find my place in a family that had never truly accepted me as equal. Claire answered the door in her bathrobe, her hair unwashed and her eyes red-rimmed. She looked terrible, and for a moment my anger was tempered by concern. "Ross, what are you doing here? We need to talk." "About everything." She stepped aside reluctantly, and I followed her into their living room. David emerged from the kitchen, took one look at my face, and quietly excused himself to his study. "David told you," Claire said flatly, sinking into her armchair. "About the adoption? He told me some of it, but I want to hear it from you. I want to understand how you could know this my entire life and never tell me." Claire was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you remember when we were little, how Mom used to tell us bedtime stories about princesses?" The question seemed to come from nowhere, but I nodded. "She would tell you stories about adopted princesses who were rescued by kind kings and queens, who were chosen because they were so special that their new parents couldn't resist them. She told me stories about princesses who were born to their kingdoms, who had a responsibility to carry on royal bloodlines and traditions." I felt sick. She was preparing us, even then. I was 5 years old when I first understood what adoption meant, and I asked her why we had different stories. She sat me down and explained that you were adopted, but that it was a special secret that I had to help keep because it might hurt your feelings. She said you might feel like you didn't belong if you knew the truth, and that it was my job as your big sister to make sure you always felt loved and included. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. My mother had turned Claire into a co-conspirator in the deception, making her complicit in keeping me ignorant of my own history. But as we got older, Claire continued. The story changed. Mom started talking about biological connections, about how blood relationships were different from chosen ones. She said I had a special responsibility because I was the one who would carry on the family genetics, the family traditions. "And you believed her?" Claire's eyes flashed with anger. "What choice did I have? I was a child. And besides, look around. You, Ross, look how differently we were treated. You were always praised for being helpful and sweet. I was expected to excel, to achieve, to make Mom proud in ways that mattered to her legacy." "That's not," I started, but Claire cut me off. "Do you know what Mom said to me the day before my wedding? She said that I was finally going to fulfill my purpose, that I was going to give her the grandchildren she'd been waiting for. She said it was what I was born for, literally born for, because you couldn't give her biological grandchildren." I stared at her, seeing clearly for the first time the prison that our mother had built for both of us. Claire had been trapped by expectations and biological determinism just as surely as I had been trapped by ignorance and artificial limitations. "So when you announced your pregnancy," she whispered, "it felt like you were taking the one thing that was supposed to be mine, the one thing I was supposed to be better at than you." I pulled the locket from my pocket and showed it to her. This was from my birth mother. She wanted me to have it when I turned 18. It's been sitting in a chest for 17 years. Claire examined the locket, her expression softening as she saw the photograph inside. "She looks so young, and she looks like she loved you. She did love me, enough to give me up so I could have a better life. But our mother has spent 35 years making sure I never knew that love existed." We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us processing the weight of our mother's manipulations and the ways they had shaped our relationship with each other. "I'm sorry," Claire said finally. "I'm sorry for what I said at dinner, and I'm sorry for all the years I resented you for things that weren't your fault. I was angry at the wrong person." "We both were," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "The question is, what do we do now?" 3 days later, I was leaving the grocery store when I spotted Claire in the parking lot, sitting in her car with the engine running. She appeared to be crying. Without thinking, I walked over and tapped on her window. She rolled it down her face streaked with tears and mascara. "Roz, what are you doing here?" "Shopping for actual food instead of living on crackers and ginger ale," I said, gesturing to my grocery bags. "The question is, what are you doing sitting in a parking lot?" "Crying?" Claire glanced toward the medical complex across the street, and I followed her gaze. Among the various specialist offices, I could see the sign for Reproductive Health Associates. "Oh, Claire." I set my groceries on the ground and leaned against her car. "How long have you been going there?" "4 years," she whispered. "Dr. Martinez is wonderful, but I think even she's running out of ideas. Can I hesitated, not wanting to overstep. "Would you like me to come with you?" "To an appointment? I mean, if you think it would help." Claire looked surprised. "You would do that?" "Of course I would. We're sisters regardless of biology. And I'm a nurse. I might be able to help you understand some of the medical terminology." She reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled appointment card. "I have an appointment Friday morning. Dr. Martinez wants to discuss our options going forward." Her voice broke on the last words. I looked at the appointment card, noting how worn it was around the edges, as if Claire had been carrying it for weeks. The date was for a consultation about advanced reproductive technologies, which could mean anything from more aggressive fertility treatments to surrogacy. "What time Friday?" 10:30. "But Ross, you don't understand how hard this is." Sitting in that waiting room, surrounded by pregnant women and couples holding babies, knowing that everyone else seems to be successful while I keep failing. I thought about my own experiences in medical waiting rooms, the years of hoping and disappointment. Actually, I think I understand better than you might think. That Friday, I met Claire in the parking lot of the medical complex. She looked pale and nervous, clutching David's hand like a lifeline. He had taken the morning off work to be there, something I knew he'd been doing more and more frequently for these appointments. "Thank you for coming," Claire said as we walked toward the building. "I know this is awkward, especially with your pregnancy." "It's not awkward," I assured her, though part of me wondered if that was entirely true. Being visibly pregnant in a fertility clinic did feel strange, like flaunting something precious in front of people who desperately wanted it. The waiting room was exactly as Claire had described, filled with hope and desperation in equal measure. I watched couples studying pamphlets about IVF success rates. Women my age and older checking their phones obsessively, probably tracking ovulation cycles and hormone levels. When Dr. Martinez called Claire's name, she looked back at me uncertainly. "Go." I encouraged her. "I'll be right here." But Claire shook her head. "Please come with us. I want you to hear this too." Dr. Martinez was a kind-faced woman in her 50s who immediately put us all at ease. She had Claire's file spread across her desk, and I could see pages and pages of test results, treatment records, and notes. "Claire, David, I'm glad you brought support today," she said, nodding at me. "What we're going to discuss isn't easy." She pulled out a chart showing Claire's hormone levels over the past 4 years. "As you know, all of your baseline fertility tests have come back normal. Your hormone levels are excellent. Your fallopian tubes are clear. Your uterine lining responds well to treatment. David's sperm analysis is also completely normal. Then, why do I keep losing babies?" Claire's voice was raw with frustration. "That's what we call unexplained recurrent pregnancy loss. It's incredibly frustrating because there's no clear cause we can address. However, I've been reviewing your case with some colleagues, and we have some new options to consider." Dr. Martinez turned to a fresh page in Claire's file. "The first option is to try a more aggressive approach with your next pregnancy. We would monitor you very closely from the moment you conceive, with weekly blood draws and ultrasounds. We'd also put you on progesterone supplements and baby aspirin, which have shown some success in preventing miscarriage." "And if that doesn't work?" David asked. The second option is to consider using a gestational carrier. Your eggs, David's sperm, but another woman would carry the pregnancy. It's more complex legally and emotionally, but it would eliminate any uterine factors that might be contributing to the pregnancy losses. I watched Claire's face crumble as the reality of these options sank in. After years of trying, she was facing the possibility that her body might never be able to carry a baby to term. There's also a third option, Dr. Martinez said gently. It's not medical, but it's important to discuss. Sometimes, after years of fertility treatments and losses, couples find peace in choosing to live without children or to pursue adoption. No, Claire's response was immediate and fierce. I won't give up. There has to be something else we can try. Dr. Martinez nodded understandingly. I respect that completely. But Claire, I want you to know that taking a break from treatment doesn't mean giving up forever. Sometimes our bodies and minds need time to heal before we can move forward. After we left the appointment, the three of us sat in Claire's car in silence. David was staring straight ahead, his jaw tight with stress. Claire was crying quietly, her hands pressed against her flat stomach. I'm sorry you had to hear all that, she said to me finally. I'm not sorry. I'm glad I understand what you've been going through. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Claire, can I ask you something? Have you ever considered that maybe your worth isn't tied to your ability to have children? She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Easy for you to say you're pregnant. That's not what I mean. I mean, you're an amazing person, funny, intelligent, creative. You have a successful career, a husband who adores you, friends who value you. You're not just a potential mother. You're a whole person with value that exists independent of your reproductive capabilities. But that's not what I was raised to believe. Her voice was barely a whisper. From the time I was little, Mom made it clear that my primary purpose was to carry on the family line. Every achievement, every milestone was just preparation for the main event, giving her grandchildren. David finally spoke. Maybe it's time to stop living for your mother's expectations and start living for your own happiness. Claire turned to look at him, and I saw something shift in her expression. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked like she was considering the possibility that there might be a different path forward. What would that look like? She asked. I don't know, David admitted. But I know it would start with being honest with our families, with our friends, with ourselves about what we've been going through. No more pretending that we're just not ready for children yet. Claire pulled out her phone and showed me a photo of the fertility clinic's billing statement. The total amount owed was staggering tens of thousands of dollars that they had paid. Out of pocket over the years. We've spent our entire savings on treatments. We took out a second mortgage on the house. We've put our lives on hold for 4 years, turning down job opportunities and trips and experiences because everything revolved around the next treatment, the next appointment, the next possibility. I looked at the numbers, stunned. Claire, I had no idea. How could you? We've been pretending everything was fine while our marriage and our finances fell apart around us. She leaned back against the headrest, looking exhausted. David wants to stop. He's been wanting to stop for over a year, but I keep pushing for just one more try. David reached over and took her hand. I want to stop because I love you, not because I've given up hope. I want us to have a life together that isn't defined by what we don't have. As I watched them together, I realized that my pregnancy announcement hadn't just been painful for Claire because of her fertility struggles. It had forced her to confront the reality that life was moving forward for everyone else, while she remained trapped in a cycle of hope and disappointment. What if we all went to counseling together? I suggested. Family therapy to help us navigate all the secrets and expectations and resentments that have built up over the years. Claire looked skeptical. You think Mom and Dad would agree to that? I think it's time to stop asking permission and start demanding honesty, I said firmly. We're both adults, and we deserve to know the truth about our own lives. The following Tuesday, I had my first prenatal appointment since learning about the adoption. Sitting in the exam room, listening to my baby's heartbeat for the second time felt surreal. This tiny life growing inside me was the first blood relative. I had any conscious memory of knowing that Dr. Sarah Chen, my obstetrician, noticed my emotional state immediately. "Is everything all right, Rosalyn? You seem more anxious than excited today." I recently learned some information about my family medical history that I wasn't aware of before, I said carefully. "I was wondering if it's too late to update my intake." Forms. Dr. Chen pulled up my file on her computer. "It's never too late to provide more accurate medical information." "What did you learn?" I took a deep breath. "I'm adopted. I just found out last week, and I'm trying to get information about my birth family's medical history." Dr. Chen's expression shifted to one of professional concern. "That's a significant piece of information. Do you have any details about your birth parents' health? Any genetic conditions or pregnancy complications?" I pulled out the letter from Mary Catherine Donovan that I'd been carrying with me since finding it. "I have very limited information, but I do have contact details from my birth mother. I haven't reached out to her yet. I would strongly encourage you to make that contact, even if it feels emotionally complicated. Genetic medical history becomes especially important during pregnancy and will be valuable information for your child's health records as well." After the appointment, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot, staring at the phone number on the letter. It was mid-afternoon on a Tuesday. Would Mary Catherine even be available? Did she still live at this address? Would she want to hear from me after all these years? Before I could lose my nerve, I dialed the number. The phone rang 3 times. Before a woman's voice answered, "Hello? Hi, I'm looking for Mary Catherine Donovan. This is Kate. Who's calling?" "Kate." She went by Kate now. I tried to picture the 17-year-old girl in the photograph as a woman in her 50s. "My name is Rosalyn Williams. I think you might be my birth mother." The silence on the other end stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. Then I heard a sharp intake of breath. "Rosalyn? Is it really you?" "Yes." My voice came out as barely a whisper. Oh my God. I've hoped for this call for 35 years. She was crying now, and so was I. "Are you okay? Are you healthy? Are you happy?" "I'm okay. I'm pregnant. That's why I'm calling. My doctor said I should get medical history information, and I just found out about the adoption last week." "You just found out?" Her voice sharpened with concern. "Your parents never told you?" "No. My sister's husband accidentally revealed it, thinking I already knew." Kate was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "Honey, I'm so sorry. That wasn't supposed to happen. When I placed you for adoption, one of my conditions was that you would be told about me when you turned 18. I even wrote you a letter. I found the letter. And the locket. They were hidden in a chest in my childhood bedroom. Those were supposed to be given to you 17 years ago." Her voice was tight with anger. "I specifically requested that you know about your origins when you became an adult. I wanted you to be able to contact me if you ever wanted to." We talked for over an hour. Kate told me about her life, how she'd finished high school, gone to college, become a nurse practitioner, married, and had 2 more children. She'd never forgotten about me, had thought about me every year on my birthday, had always hoped I would reach out someday. "Tell me about your pregnancy," she said. "How are you feeling? Any complications?" "So far, so good. I'm 12 weeks along." "But Kate, can I ask about your pregnancy with me? Any problems, complications, anything my doctor should know about?" "My pregnancy with you was actually very easy. No morning sickness, no complications, normal delivery. You were healthy and perfect. But there are some things in our family medical history you should know about." She told me about her family's tendency toward gestational diabetes. a grandfather who'd had heart problems, and a maternal line with a history of breast cancer. All information that could be crucial for my health and my baby's health. Kate, can I ask you something personal? Do you ever regret your decision? Never, she said immediately. Not once. I was 17, unmarried, with no support from your biological father or his family. I was barely supporting myself with a part-time job at a grocery store. Placing you for adoption was the most loving thing I could do. But I've always regretted not being able to watch you grow up, not knowing what kind of person you became. I became a pediatric nurse, I told her. I work in the NICU, taking care of premature babies. She laughed through her tears. Of course you did. It's in your genes caring for children. I've been a nurse practitioner for 20 years, specializing in family medicine. We made plans to meet in person the following weekend. Kate lived only 3 hours away in Portland, Oregon. She wanted to drive down to meet me, to see me face to face for the first time since I was 6 months old. After ending the call, I sat in my car feeling emotionally drained, but also strangely complete. For the first time in my life, I understood where some of my traits and tendencies came from. The fact that I'd naturally gravitated toward nursing wasn't coincidence. It was genetic predisposition combined with personal choice. That evening, I called Claire to tell her about the conversation with Kate. How do you feel? She asked. About talking to her, relieved, grateful, and angry that I missed 17 years of knowing she existed and wanted a relationship with me. Are you going to tell Mom and Dad? I thought about that for a moment. I think I have to. They need to know that their secret is out, and they need to explain why they violated the terms of the adoption agreement. Do you want me to be there when you confront them? Would you? Yes, I think it's time for all the family secrets to come out. We arranged to meet at our parents' house that Saturday afternoon. I would go directly there after meeting Kate for the first time, armed with information and support from both my birth mother and my adoptive sister. But first, I had to prepare myself for a conversation that would likely change our family dynamics forever. I was no longer the compliant, grateful daughter who accepted whatever scraps of affection were offered. I was a woman who deserved honesty, respect, and the full truth about my own life. The pregnancy had given me more than just the promise of motherhood. It had given me the courage to demand better treatment from the people who claimed to love me. My baby deserved to be born into a family built on truth rather than secrets, and I was going to make sure that happened, no matter how uncomfortable the conversations ahead might be. Friday night, I could barely sleep. Tomorrow, I would meet the woman who had given me life, and then I would confront the people who had hidden her existence from me for 35 years. Both conversations would require courage I wasn't sure I possessed. But I knew I had to find it. My baby deserved a grandmother who had loved her from a distance for decades, and a family that was finally ready to tell the truth. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my nervous energy. I drove to the small cafe where Kate and I had arranged to meet, arriving 15 minutes early. I ordered a decaf coffee and sat facing the door, my hands trembling slightly. As I waited when she walked in, I recognized her immediately. The kind eyes from the locket photograph, now framed by laugh lines and silver-streaked brown hair. She was smaller than I'd imagined, probably about my height, wearing a simple blue sweater and jeans. She looked around the cafe uncertainly until our eyes met, and then her face lit up with a smile that I realized I'd inherited. Rosalyn. She said my name like a prayer, crossing the cafe quickly to reach my table. You're so beautiful. You look exactly like I imagined you would. We hugged awkwardly at first, then with growing warmth. She smelled like vanilla and something, floral perfume I didn't recognize, but that felt instantly comforting. I can't believe you're really here, she said, sitting across from me and studying my face intently. I've dreamed about this moment for 35 years. We spent the next 3 hours talking. Kate told me about her life, how she'd moved to Portland after high school, worked her way through nursing school, met her husband Tom when she was 25. They had 2 children, my half-siblings, Michael, who was 30, and Sarah, who was 20-8. Double quotes, do they know about me? I asked. Oh yes. We've always talked about you openly. They've been hoping you would contact us someday too. Michael especially, he's always wanted an older sister. She showed me photos on her phone. Michael, a tall man with my eyes and smile, working as a teacher. Sarah, petite like Kate, who is a social worker. Both had families of their own. You have nephews and nieces, Kate said softly. A whole family who would love to know you if you're interested. The idea was overwhelming and wonderful at the same time. A family that had known about me, that had wanted me in their lives, that had been waiting for me to find them. Kate, can I ask about my biological father? Her expression darkened slightly. His name was Ryan O'Brien. He was 18, a year ahead of me in high school. When I told him I was pregnant, he denied. The baby was his and refused to have anything to do with us. His parents actually offered me money to leave town and never contact their family again. Did you take it? I took enough to pay for prenatal care and delivery, but I used their rejection as motivation. I was determined to prove that I could make something of my life despite their assumptions about me. Do you know what happened to him? He went to college on his parents' money, became a lawyer, married someone from his social class. As far as I know, he never acknowledged you existed. Kate reached across the table and squeezed my hand. But honey, his loss was your adoptive parents' gain. At least, I thought it was. We talked about the adoption process, and Kate's face grew troubled as I described how the secret had been kept from me. Rosalyn, I need you to understand something. I researched adoption extensively before making my decision. I chose your parents specifically because they promised they would be open about your adoption from the beginning. It was one of my non-negotiable conditions. What exactly did they promise? Kate pulled out a worn folder from her purse. I kept copies of everything. Here's the adoption agreement. I read through the legal documents, my anger growing with each paragraph. The adoptive parents, my parents, had agreed to tell me about my adoption by age 5, to provide regular updates to Kate until I turned 18, and to facilitate contact between us when I became an adult, if I desired it. They never provided any updates after the first year, Kate said quietly. I sent letters and photos occasionally, but they were returned unopened. I assumed you weren't interested in knowing about me. Kate, I never received a single letter or photo. I didn't even know you existed until last week. Her face crumpled. 34 years. I missed 34 years of your life because they lied to both of us. I felt a rage building inside me that was protective and fierce, not just for myself, but for Kate, who had been denied the opportunity to know the daughter she had sacrificed so much for. There's something else you need to know, I said gently, about why they might have hidden the adoption so aggressively. I told her about Claire, about the fertility struggles and miscarriages, about my mother's emphasis on biological family connections. Kate listened with growing understanding and sympathy. Oh, that poor girl. But Rosalyn, that doesn't excuse what your parents did. They made legal commitments that they violated, and they hurt all of us in the process. I'm supposed to confront them this afternoon. Claire is going to be there for support. Good. You deserve answers, and they deserve to face the consequences of their choices. Kate paused, then pulled an envelope from her folder. I want you to have this. It's the original copy of the adoption papers, with all their promises highlighted. Don't let them gaslight you or minimize what they did. Before I left the cafe, Kate and I exchanged current contact information and made plans for her to visit again after my baby was born. She wanted to be a grandmother to my child in whatever capacity I felt comfortable with. I love you, she said as we hugged goodbye. I've loved you every single day since you were born, and I'm so proud of the woman you've become. Driving to my parents' house, I felt armed with truth and righteous anger. Kate's love and support had given me strength I hadn't known I possessed. I was no longer the grateful adopted daughter who accepted whatever crumbs of affection were offered. I was a woman who had been lied to and manipulated, and I deserved better. Claire was already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly in the living room with our parents. Mom looked nervous. Dad looked confused about why we'd requested this family meeting. Mom, Dad, I said, settling into the chair across from them and placing Kate's folder on the coffee table. We need to talk about my adoption. The blood drained from my mother's face. Rosalyn, honey, what are you talking about? Don't. My voice was sharper than I'd ever used with them before. Don't lie to me anymore. I know I'm adopted. I've met Kate, my birth mother, and I know about all the promises you made and broke. Dad looked genuinely shocked. How did you find out? David accidentally told her, Claire said quietly. He thought she already knew. Mom turned on Claire with fury. You told him? That was private family information. Private from whom? I demanded. Private from me? The person whose life it actually affects. I opened Kate's folder and spread the adoption papers across the coffee table. You promised to tell me about my adoption by age 5. You promised to maintain contact with Kate until I was 18. You promised to facilitate a relationship between us when I became an adult, if I wanted one. Dad picked up the papers with shaking hands, reading them as if seeing them for the first time. Helen, what is this? We agreed to all of this? Mom's composure finally cracked. We did what we thought was best for everyone involved. You were happy, Rosalyn. You had a good childhood, a good education, a loving family. Why complicate that with confusing information about your origins? Because it wasn't your choice to make. I stood up, my voice rising. Those weren't your secrets to keep. You violated a legal agreement and denied me the right to know my own history. We were protecting you, Mom insisted. That girl was 17, unmarried, from a troubled background. We wanted you to grow up knowing you belonged here, not feeling like you were some charity case we took in. Some charity case? I stared at her in disbelief. Is that how you really see me? Claire spoke up for the first time. Mom, that's enough. You can't justify 35 years of lies by claiming you were protecting anyone. You stay out of this, Claire. This is between Rosalyn and us. No, it's not, I said firmly. Claire has been carrying your secrets and dealing with your expectations her entire life, too. This affects all of us. I pulled out my phone and showed them the photo Kate had sent me of Michael and Sarah with their children. These are my half-siblings and their kids. My nieces and nephews. A whole family that has been waiting to know me while you convince me I was lucky to have been chosen by you. Dad was crying now, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Rosalyn, we do love you. We've always loved you. I believe that, Dad, but love doesn't justify lies. Love doesn't justify denying me the right to know where I came from. I gathered up the papers and put them back in the folder. Kate loved me too. Enough to choose a family she thought would honor their commitments. To both of us, Mom was still trying to maintain control. What do you want from us? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. But we can't change the past. I want honesty, complete honesty. About why you really kept this secret, about how you justified it to yourselves. All these years, about why you made Claire complicit in your deception. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Finally, Mom spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, because I was terrified you would leave us. When Claire was born and we had 2 babies 10 months apart, I was overwhelmed and exhausted. But I was also desperately afraid that if you knew you were adopted, you would want to find your real family and we would lose you. So you made sure I never had that choice. Yes, her admission was broken, defeated. And I convinced myself it was better for everyone. Better for you to feel secure, better for us to feel like a normal family, better for Claire to have a clear identity as our biological child. I looked at my father, who was staring at his hands. Dad, is that how you felt too? I went along with your mother's wishes because I was afraid too. Afraid of the complications, afraid of having to share you with another family. I thought if we just loved you enough, it wouldn't matter where you came from. But it does matter, I said gently. Not because I love you less, but because knowing my full story makes me more complete, not less. Claire reached over and took my hand. Russ, what do you need from them now? I thought about that for a moment. What did I need? An apology? A promise to do better? A commitment to welcome Kate into their lives? I need you to meet Kate, I said. Finally, I need you to acknowledge the wrong you did to her and to me, and to make amends if that's possible. I need you to accept that my family is bigger now, and that's a good thing, not a threat. Mom looked like she wanted to argue, but Dad spoke first. Of course, whatever you need, whatever makes this right. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't undo 35 years of lies and missed opportunities. But it was a beginning, a foundation on which we might be able to build something more honest and complete. As I drove home that evening, I felt my baby move for the first time, a gentle flutter that reminded me that this child would be born into a family that finally knew how to tell the truth. The week following the confrontation with my parents passed in a haze of emotional exhaustion. I took 3 days off work, something I never did, and spent most of the time sitting in my garden, trying to process 35 years of my life through this new lens of truth. Everything felt different now. The birth certificate I'd used to apply for my passport was a lie. My understanding of my genetic heritage, my family medical history, even my age, everything I thought I knew about my fundamental identity had been built on deception. I found myself studying my reflection obsessively, searching for traces of Kate in my features, wondering what traits had come from Ryan O'Brien, the father who had rejected my existence. For 35 years, I'd attributed my love of reading to my adoptive father's influence, my tendency toward worry to my adoptive mother's anxious nature. Now I wondered what was really mine versus what I had absorbed from the family that raised me. Wednesday evening, Claire showed up at my door with takeout containers and a bottle of sparkling cider. You look terrible, she said bluntly, setting the food on my kitchen counter. Thanks. That's exactly what every pregnant woman wants to hear. I mean it though. You've lost weight and you have dark circles under your eyes. When's the last time you ate a real meal? I couldn't remember. Food had seemed irrelevant since Saturday's revelations. Everything tasted like cardboard, and my appetite had disappeared entirely. Ross, I'm worried about you. And I'm worried about the baby. You can't just stop taking care of yourself because you found out you're adopted. It's not that simple, Claire. I sank into a chair at my kitchen table, feeling older than my years. You've known who you were your entire life. You've known where you came from, what genes you carried, what traits were yours by right. I've been living someone else's story without even knowing it. Claire sat across from me, her expression thoughtful. But does it really change who you are? You're still the same person you were 2 weeks ago? Am I? I'm not even the age I thought I was. According to the real adoption papers, I'm only 34, not 35. I've been celebrating my birthday on the wrong day my entire life. Okay, that's admittedly weird, but Ross, you're still you. You're still the woman who chose to dedicate her life to caring for sick babies. You're still the sister who dropped everything to support me through my fertility struggles. You're still going to be an amazing mother. I pulled out the folder Kate had given me and spread the contents across the table. Birth records, medical information, photos of my biological family. Look at this, Claire. Look at all the people I should have known about. Michael and Sarah sent me letters through Kate letters they wrote when they were teenagers, hoping I would contact them someday. They wanted a relationship with me, and I never even knew they existed. Claire picked up one of the letters, written in a teenage boy's careful handwriting. Dear Big Sister Rosalyn, it began. I'm 15 now, and Sarah is 13. We talk about you a lot, wondering what you're like, what you're doing. Mom always says you're smart and kind like her. We hope someday we can meet you and be a real family. He was 15 when he wrote that, I said, my voice breaking. 15 years old and wanting to know his sister. And I was already 30, completely unaware he existed. That's heartbreaking, Claire admitted, but it's not your fault. It's not even really their fault. It's Mom and Dad's fault for keeping you all apart. I nodded, but the logic didn't ease the pain. I keep thinking about all the times I felt like I didn't quite fit, like I was trying to be something I wasn't. Remember how Mom used to say I was such a serious child, like it was a character flaw? Maybe I was serious because I was unconsciously grieving a loss I couldn't even name. Claire was quiet for a moment, considering this. You know what's strange? I always envied how self-contained you seemed. Like you didn't need validation from anyone, like you were complete all by yourself. I never realized you might have been protecting yourself from rejection. I've been thinking about that a lot. How much of my personality was shaped by unconsciously knowing I was different, knowing I had to earn my place in the family? I pulled out my phone and showed Claire a text Kate had sent earlier. Kate says I was a very social baby before the adoption, always smiling, always reaching for people. But my earliest memories are of being cautious, careful not to ask for too much attention. God, that's devastating. You were a baby, Ross. You shouldn't have had to earn love. But that's exactly what I learned to do. Be helpful, be grateful, don't make waves, don't ask for too much. I became the person I thought they wanted instead of figuring out who I actually was. Claire reached across the table and took my hand. So who are you actually? If you could strip away all the conditioning and expectations and people-pleasing, who's Rosalyn really? It was a question I'd been asking myself for days, and I was nowhere close to an answer. I don't know. I thought I knew, but maybe I've been performing a role for so long that I've lost track of my authentic self. Well, let's start with what we know for sure. You chose to become a nurse, even though Mom pushed you toward it. But you could have chosen any type of nursing, and you specifically chose pediatrics. What drew you to that? I thought about it carefully. I love the resilience of children, their ability to heal, to bounce back from trauma, to trust again even after being hurt. I love being part of their recovery stories. That sounds like it comes from your heart, not from family pressure. Maybe, but what if it also comes from my own unresolved childhood trauma? What if I'm drawn to helping other vulnerable children because I was a vulnerable child who needed help? Would that make your choice less valid? Would that make you less good at your job? I considered that. No, I suppose not. Maybe it makes me better at my job because I understand what it feels like to need protection and advocacy. Claire smiled. See? You're still you, just with a more complete understanding of why you became you. We talked until late into the evening, and slowly I began to feel less like I was drowning in identity confusion and more like I was finally getting to know myself honestly for the first time. Claire, can I ask you something that might be painful? Of course. Do you think our parents love me as much as they love you? She was quiet for a long time, clearly struggling with how to answer honestly without causing more pain. I think they love you deeply, but differently, she said finally. They love you like someone they chose and feel responsible for. They love me like someone they created and feel proud of. Both types of love are real, but they're not the same. It was exactly what I had suspected, but had never been able to articulate. The difference in their love wasn't necessarily about more or less. It was about ownership versus gratitude, expectation versus appreciation. The question is, Claire continued, what kind of love do you want to give your own child? I placed my hand on my growing belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. Unconditional love. Love that doesn't depend on performance or gratitude or meeting my expectations. Love that sees them as a complete person worthy of respect from day one. Then you're already breaking the cycle. As Claire left that night, I realized something important. Learning about my adoption hadn't changed who I was at my core. It had freed me to become more fully myself. I no longer had to perform gratitude for being chosen. I no longer had to suppress parts of my personality that didn't fit the narrative my adoptive family had constructed. I was 34 years old, not 35. I was a Williams by choice and love, not by biology. I was a Donovan by genetics and original love. I was about to become a mother to a child who would know their full story from the very beginning. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. Sunday morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in weeks. I needed more answers, and I knew where to find them. I drove to my parents' house early before they left for church, armed with specific questions and a determination to get the complete truth. Dad answered the door in his bathrobe, surprised to see me. "Rosalyn, is everything all right?" "I need to see the original adoption paperwork. All of it. And I need to know exactly what contact you had with Kate over the years." Mom appeared behind him, already dressed for church. "We've been through this, dear. What's done is done." "No, we haven't been through this. We've barely scratched the surface." I stepped past them into the house. "I spoke with Kate several times this week, and there are discrepancies in the stories. I need to understand what really happened." Dad led me to his study, a small room lined with filing cabinets and bookshelves. "The adoption papers are in the safe. Give me a moment to get them." While he worked the combination, I turned to my mother. "Kate says she sent letters and photos for years, but they were all returned unopened. Is that true?" Mom's jaw tightened. "We felt it was better to make a clean break." "Constant contact with the birth mother would have been confusing for you. That wasn't your decision to make. You agreed to facilitate contact." Dad pulled out a thick manila envelope and set it on his desk. "Here's everything. The original adoption agreement, all the legal paperwork, and..." He hesitated. "And what?" "And the letters Kate sent. We kept them all." I stared at him in shock. "You kept them? But you returned them unopened?" "We made copies before returning them," Mom said defensively. "We wanted to make sure there was nothing inappropriate in them, nothing that would upset you." Dad opened a smaller envelope and pulled out dozens of letters, cards, and photographs spanning decades. "She sent these regularly until you turned 18. After that, they became less frequent, maybe 1 or 2 a year." My hands shook as I picked up the first letter, postmarked when I was 2 years old. Kate's handwriting was younger then, less assured, but full of love and hope. "Dear Rosalyn," it began, "you're 2 years old today. I can't believe how fast the time has gone. I hope you're walking and talking and getting into everything like most 2-year-olds do. I'm in my 2nd year of nursing school now, and every time I learn something new about child development, I think about you and wonder if you're reaching those milestones." The letter went on to describe Kate's life, her studies, her dreams for the future. At the bottom, she'd written, "I love you more every day, even though we're apart. I hope your parents are sharing my letters with you, and that someday you'll understand how much thought and love went into placing you with them." I looked up at my parents with tears in my eyes. "She asked you to share these with me? She assumed you would honor that part of the agreement?" "We were going to," Dad said weakly. "When you got older, when you could understand." "When exactly?" "When I turned 5, like you promised in the adoption agreement." "When I turned 18? I'm 34 years old now, and you were still planning to keep these from me." I rifled through more letters, finding photos of Kate graduating from nursing, school, getting married, holding my half-siblings as babies. Each envelope was marked for Rosalyn in Kate's careful handwriting. "Look at this," I said, holding up a photo of Michael as a toddler. This is from when he was 3. Kate wrote on the back, Michael talks about his big sister Rosalyn all the time. He can't wait to meet you someday. I looked at my mother with growing anger. A 3-year-old was talking about me, hoping to meet me, while you convinced me I was lucky just to be wanted by anyone. Mom's composure finally cracked completely. We were scared, all right? We were terrified that if you knew about her, you would want to go back to her. We couldn't compete with the fantasy of a birth mother who gave you up out of love. You didn't have to compete with her. The adoption agreement made it clear that you were my parents, that she wasn't trying to reclaim me. She just wanted to be part of my life in whatever way was appropriate. I picked up another letter, this one from my 10th birthday. Kate had included a small photo of herself holding a birthday cake with 10 candles. I made you a birthday cake. Today, she'd written, even though I know you're celebrating with your real family, I light a candle for you every year and make a wish that you're happy and healthy and loved. Dad was crying openly now. We thought we were protecting you from confusion, from divided loyalties, but you created divided loyalties anyway. You made me choose between being grateful to you and being curious about my origins. You made those things mutually exclusive when they never had to be. I found a letter from my 18th birthday, thicker than the others. Inside was the original letter I'd found in the cedar chest, along with a duplicate of the locket and several additional pages. My dearest Rosalyn, this version read, Today you turn 18, and according to our adoption agreement, you should finally know that I exist. I'm writing this longer letter in case your parents haven't told you about me yet, to explain everything from the beginning. The letter contained Kate's full story, her pregnancy, the decision to place me for adoption, her hopes for ongoing contact, her love for me that had never diminished. At the end, she'd written, if you're reading this, it means your parents kept their promise to tell you about me. I hope you understand that everything I did was out of love, and I hope that if you want to meet me, your parents will help make that happen. She assumed you had told me, I said, looking up at my parents. Even after 18 years of returned letters, she still believed you were people of your word. Mom sat down heavily in Dad's desk chair. We kept meaning to tell you. But as the years went by, it became harder and harder to admit what we'd done. How do you tell your child that you've been lying to them their entire life? You start with the truth. You start by honoring the commitments you made. I gathered up the letters and photos, decades of misconnection and love. These weren't yours to keep from me. This relationship wasn't yours to control. Dad reached into the envelope one more time and pulled out a legal document I hadn't seen before. There's something else. Something we've never told anyone, not even Claire. I took the paper and read it carefully. It was a modification to the original adoption agreement filed when I was 5 years old. My parents had petitioned the court to seal my adoption records completely and terminate any obligation for ongoing contact with my birth family. You went to court to legally cut me off from Kate. We told the judge that the birth mother was being intrusive, that her attempts at contact were disruptive to her family, Mom said in a small voice. We said it was in your best interest to have a clean break, and the judge agreed. Judges usually side with adoptive parents in those situations, especially when the child is young and seems well-adjusted, Dad explained. Kate was never told about the modification. As far as she knew, we were just not responsive to her letters. The betrayal was breathtaking. Not only had they violated their original agreement, they had gone to court to legally justify their deception. They had told a judge that Kate was a problem to be eliminated rather than a person who loved me. Do you understand what you did? I asked quietly. You didn't just keep letters from me. You didn't just hide my history. You actively worked to erase Kate from my life, and you made it look like it was for my own good. We thought it was for your own good, Mom insisted. We thought you would be happier not knowing, but that wasn't your choice to make. And you had no right to lie to a court about Kate's motivations. She wasn't being intrusive, she was honoring the agreement you had voluntarily entered into. I stood up feeling exhausted and angry and deeply sad for all of us, for Kate, who had been systematically shut out of my life, for me, who had been denied the right to know my full story, and even for my parents, who had been so driven by fear that they had compromised their own integrity repeatedly over the years. I'm taking all of this, I said, indicating the letters and documents. These belong to me, and they should have been mine from the beginning. Of course, Dad said immediately. We should have given them to you years ago. I also want you to write a letter to Kate, an apology for what you did, an acknowledgement that you violated the adoption agreement and lied to the court. She deserves to know that her letters were received and kept, that her love for me was never in question. Mom looked like she wanted to argue, but Dad nodded. We'll write the letter. What else do you need from us? I need you to understand that my relationship with Kate doesn't diminish my relationship with you. I need you to stop seeing her as a threat and start seeing her as someone who has loved me from a distance for 34 years. And I need you to welcome her into our family in whatever capacity feels appropriate. What if she wants to take you away from us? Mom asked, voicing her deepest fear. She doesn't want to take me away from you. She never did. She wants to be part of my life, part of my baby's life, in whatever way I'm comfortable with. The only people who ever threatened our family relationships were you, by lying about them. I packed up all the letters and documents, along with the extra photos Kate had sent over the years. There were decades of missed birthdays, graduations, achievements, and milestones that she had commemorated from a far dot as I prepared to leave. Dad caught my arm gently. Rosalyn, I want you to know that we do love you. We've always loved you. We made terrible choices out of fear, but our love for you is never in question. I know you love me, Dad, but love without honesty isn't enough. Love without respect for my autonomy isn't healthy. I need both from now on. Driving home with the car full of evidence of Kate's enduring love, I felt a complex mixture of grief and relief. Grief for all the lost years, all the misconnections, all the ways our family had been damaged by secrets and lies. But also relief that the truth was finally out, that I finally had the complete picture of my origins and the people who had shaped my life from both near and far. That evening, I called Kate and read her some of the letters she had written to me over the years. She cried hearing her own words read back to her, remembering the hope and love that had motivated each one. I never stopped believing that someday you would know I existed, she said through her tears. I never stopped hoping that love would find a way. It did find a way, I told her. It just took 34 years and a pregnancy to finally break through all the barriers they built around me. We made plans for her to visit the following weekend, and for me to meet Michael and Sarah soon after that. My family was finally going to be complete, not because I was choosing one over the other, but because I was finally free to love all the people who had loved me from the very beginning. Kate arrived that Friday evening, carrying a small suitcase and a large photo album. I had prepared the guest room carefully, wanting her to feel welcome in my home in a way she had never been welcome in my adoptive family's life. I brought pictures, she said, settling onto my couch with the album. 34 years of wondering about you, and now I finally get to share the life I built after placing you for adoption. We ordered pizza and spent the evening going through her photo collection. Kate at 19, graduating from nursing school with honors. Kate at 25, marrying Tom at a small ceremony with her parents and siblings. Kate holding newborn. Michael, then baby Sarah, with a bittersweet expression that I now understood, joy for the children she was able to keep, combined with grief for the one she'd had to give away. Tell me about that day, I said gently. The day I was born. What was it like? Kate's eyes grew distant. It was November 15th, 1989. I'd been having contractions all night, but I was so scared that I waited until the last possible moment to go to the hospital. My mother drove me. She was the only one who supported my decision to place you for adoption. Everyone else thought I should either marry your biological father or raise you myself. What did you think? I thought I was 17 years old, working part-time at a grocery store for minimum wage, living in my parents' basement. Your biological father had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with us. I was planning to start college in the fall, but that would have been impossible with a baby and no support. She turned to a page in the album showing her high school graduation photo. I was still a child myself, really. But I knew I loved you enough to want more for you than I could provide. She showed me the next photo herself in a hospital bed, looking exhausted but peaceful, holding a tiny baby. That's you, about 2 hours after you were born. The nurses let me hold you for as long as I wanted before your adoptive parents arrived. I studied the photo carefully. Kate looked so young, almost painfully young, but her expression as she looked down at me was pure love. What did you think about while you were holding me? I memorized everything. Your tiny fingers, the way you made little squeaking sounds when you slept, how you fit perfectly in the crook of my arm. I talked to you for hours, telling you about your grandparents, about my dreams for your future, about how much I loved you even though I was about to say goodbye. Kate turned to the next page, showing my adoptive parents holding me for the first time. They were so nervous, so excited. Your adoptive father kept asking if he was holding you correctly, and your adoptive mother cried the entire time. They seemed like good people who would cherish you. Did you have any doubts? Of course I had doubts. What 17-year-old wouldn't doubt a decision that big? But I also knew I was making the right choice. The social worker had told me about their years of trying to conceive, how much they wanted a child, how they had already prepared a nursery and read every parenting book available. Kate pulled out a letter from the album, different from the ones I'd found at my parents' house. I wrote this to you while I was in the hospital, right after you were born. I never sent it because it felt too raw, too emotional. The letter was written on hospital stationery in shaky handwriting. My precious baby girl, it began. In a few hours, you'll go home with your new parents, and I'll go home to my old life. I want you to know that these 3 days with you have been the most important of my life. I'll never forget the sound of your first cry, the way you looked at me like you knew who I was, the trust in your eyes when I fed you your bottles. I looked up at Kate with tears in my eyes. You fed me? The nurses encouraged me to take care of you while we were in the hospital together. They said it would help with bonding and would be good for both of us. I changed your diapers, gave you bottles, rocked you to sleep. For 3 days, I got to be your mother. Were you tempted to change your mind? Kate was quiet for a long moment, every hour. Every time I looked at you, part of me wanted to grab you and run away, to figure out how to make it work somehow. But then I would think about what kind of life I could give you living in poverty, struggling to finish school, dealing with the judgment of everyone who thought I'd made poor choices. I wanted you to have opportunities I couldn't provide. She turned to another page showing a young man and woman holding a toddler. These are Tom's sister and her husband with their daughter. She was born 6 months after you, and I remember holding her when she was about your age, wondering if you looked similar, if you were reaching the same milestones. Did it get easier over time, missing me? It got different. The acute grief of those first few months faded into a constant, quiet ache. I learned to live with it, but I never stopped thinking about you. Every November 15th, I would make a birthday, cake and light candles, wondering where you were, what you looked like, if you were happy. Kate showed me more photos, her college graduation, her wedding, the births of Michael and Sarah. In several photos, I could see a shadow of sadness in her eyes, even during happy moments. Did Michael and Sarah ever resent me for taking up space in your heart? Never. From the time they were old enough to understand, I told them they had an older sister who lived with another family. I made sure they knew you were in a secret or something to be ashamed of. You were part of our family story, even though you weren't physically with us. She pulled out a more recent photo of Michael and Sarah as adults with their own children. Michael became a special education teacher. He says he was inspired by knowing he had a sister somewhere who might need an advocate. Sarah became a social worker specializing in family reunification. She says she wanted to help other families find their way back to each other. The idea that my existence had influenced my half-siblings' career choices was overwhelming. While I had been completely unaware of their existence, they had been shaped by knowing about me. Kate, can I ask about my biological father? Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he had stepped up? Her expression hardened slightly. Ryan O'Brien was 18 years old and terrified of disappointing his parents. When I told him I was pregnant, he accused me of trying to trap him into marriage. He suggested I get an abortion and said if I didn't, I was on my own. Did his parents know about me? Oh, yes. When I was about 6 months pregnant, his mother contacted me. She offered me money to leave town and never mentioned their son's name in connection with the pregnancy. She said they had worked too hard building their family's reputation to have it damaged by a teenage pregnancy scandal. That's horrible. It was horrible, but it was also clarifying. It made me realize that Ryan and his family were not people I wanted in your life. If they could reject you before you were even born, they didn't deserve to know the amazing person you would become. Kate pulled out one final item from the album, a small white card with baby footprints on it. These are your footprints from the hospital. I kept them all these years, along with a lock of your hair from your first haircut that the nurses saved for me. I held the card carefully, amazed that these tiny footprints had once been mine. Kate, I need you to know something. I don't blame you for placing me for adoption. I understand why you made that choice, and I respect it. What I can't understand is why my adoptive parents felt they had to erase you from my life completely. I think they were threatened by the idea that you might love me too. They wanted your love to be exclusive, undivided. They didn't understand that love multiplies, it doesn't divide. That's exactly right. Learning about you hasn't made me love them less. It's made me understand myself more completely. We stayed up until nearly midnight, sharing stories and filling in 34 years of missed conversations. When Kate finally went to bed in my guest room, I sat in my living room for a long time, processing everything I'd learned. The young woman who had given birth to me had been brave, selfless, and wise beyond her years. She had made the hardest decision a mother could make, not out of lack of love, but out of abundance of it. She had spent 34 years wondering about me, hoping for me, celebrating my existence from a distance, and she had raised 2 other children who had grown up knowing about me, caring about me, hoping to meet me someday. I wasn't just gaining a birth mother, I was gaining siblings who had been waiting their entire lives to know me. For the first time since learning about my adoption, I felt grateful rather than angry. Grateful to Kate for her sacrifice, grateful to my adoptive parents for their love despite their mistakes, and grateful that all of these relationships could finally exist honestly and openly. My baby moved strongly as I finally headed to bed. And I whispered to them, "You're going to know your whole family from the very beginning. All the people who love you, all the people who have been waiting to meet you." No secrets, no lies, just love in all its complicated, beautiful forms. The phone call came at 2 in the morning, jarring me awake from deep sleep. David's voice was strained and panicked. "Russ, I'm sorry to wake you, but I need help. She's having some kind of breakdown. She's destroying things, screaming about how unfair everything is. I don't know what to do." I was already reaching for my clothes. "Have you called anyone else?" "Her doctor? A crisis line?" I called her therapist's emergency number, but I haven't heard back. Ross, she's saying things about you, about the baby, about your birth mother. I'm scared she's going to hurt herself. I'll be right there. Try to keep her safe until I arrive. I threw on sweatpants and a hoodie, grateful that Kate was staying with me and could come along. 20 minutes later, we pulled into Claire and David's driveway to find several lights on and the sound of something crashing inside the house. David met us at the door, his hair disheveled and his face haggard. Thank God you're here. She's in the living room. She's broken our wedding china, thrown books everywhere. She keeps saying that everyone gets what they want except her. We found Claire sitting in the middle of the living room floor, surrounded by broken pieces of what had once been an expensive china cabinet. Her grandmother's antique vase, the one that had been in their family for generations, lay in shards around her feet. She was holding a framed wedding photo, staring at it with an expression that was equal parts rage and devastation. Claire? I approached her slowly, the way I would approach a frightened animal. What's going on? She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes that seemed to see right through me. What's going on? What's going on is that you get everything and I get nothing. You get pregnant without even trying. You get a birth mother who loved you so much she wrote you letters for decades. You get half-siblings who want to know you. You get everything, and I can't even keep a pregnancy past 12 weeks. Claire, that's not fair. You know that's not how any of this works. Don't. She held up a hand to stop me. Don't tell me what's fair. Nothing about this situation is fair. Do you know what I did today, Russ? I went to the baby store to look at cribs, thinking maybe if I prepared, maybe if I believed hard enough, the next pregnancy would stick. And there you were, registering for baby gear like it's the most natural thing in the world. I hadn't even known she'd seen me at the baby store. I'd been registering for a few basic items, trying to allow myself to believe this pregnancy would result in a living child. You look so happy, so confident, Claire continued, her voice becoming more agitated. Like you knew for certain that your baby would be born healthy and alive. And I realized I will never feel that confidence. I will never be able to shop for baby things without wondering if I'll have to return them in a few weeks. Kate, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped forward. Claire, I'm Kate. I know this is a difficult time, but can I share something with you? Claire looked at her with confusion. You're her birth mother. I am. And I want you to know that watching Rosalyn's happiness doesn't diminish your own pain. Your grief is real and valid, regardless of what good things happen to other people. You don't understand. Everyone gets their happy ending except me. Rosalyn gets to be reunited with the mother who loved her enough to give her up. You get to meet the daughter you've wondered about for 34 years. David gets a wife who's finally honest about their fertility struggles. Even my parents get to feel relieved that their secrets are finally out. But what do I get? I get to be the bitter sister who can't be happy for anyone else. David sat down on the floor next to her, carefully avoiding the broken china. Claire, you get to be free. Free from the pressure to be the biological daughter. Free from the expectation that your worth is tied to your ability to have children. Free to figure out who you are when you're not performing motherhood for other people. But I don't know who I am without that, she whispered. Since I was 5 years old, my entire identity has been built around being the daughter who would carry on the family line. If I'm not going to be a mother, then what am I? I moved some broken pieces aside and sat down facing her. You're Claire. You're funny and creative and stubborn and loyal. You're an excellent teacher who has influenced hundreds of students over the years. You're a friend who shows up when people need you. You're a wife who has supported David through career changes and family drama. You're all of those things, completely independent of whether you ever have biological children. But it's the only thing I've ever really wanted, she sobbed. Since I was little, playing with dolls, I dreamed about being a mother. It's the only future I ever imagined for myself. Kate spoke gently. Claire, I understand that dream. I wanted to be a mother too, and I was lucky enough to experience that with Michael and Sarah. But I also had to learn that there are many ways to be maternal, many ways to nurture and care for others. Like what? Like teaching. Like being an aunt to Rosalyn's baby. Like mentoring young women who might need guidance. Like fostering children who need temporary homes. Motherhood isn't just about biology, it's about love and care and nurturing. And you have all of those qualities. Claire looked around at the destruction she had caused. I've ruined everything. Grandma's vase, our wedding china, probably my marriage too. David reached for her hand. You haven't ruined anything that can't be repaired or replaced. And you definitely haven't ruined our marriage. But Claire, we need to get you some help. Professional help, not just the occasional therapy session when things get really bad. What kind of help? There's a support group for people dealing with infertility and pregnancy loss, I said. I can help you find one. And maybe we should look into counseling specifically for dealing with family expectations and identity issues. Claire nodded slowly. I think I need to take a break from trying to get pregnant. Not forever, just I need to figure out who I am when I'm not constantly hoping and failing and grieving. That sounds like a good idea, Kate said. And in the meantime, maybe you could explore other ways to have children in your life. Volunteer at a children's hospital, become a mentor, consider fostering or adoption when you're ready. Adoption, Claire repeated thoughtfully. I never seriously considered it because Mom always made it seem like a lesser option. Like biological children were more valuable. Well, we all know how wrong she was about that, I said firmly. Some of the strongest parent-child bonds I've seen have been between adoptive families. Love creates family, not genetics. We spent the next hour cleaning up the broken china and books while Claire talked through her feelings with Kate, who seemed to have an intuitive understanding of grief and loss. By dawn, the house was restored to order, and Claire seemed calmer, more grounded. I owe you both an apology, she said as Kate and I prepared to leave. I've been so focused on my own pain that I couldn't celebrate your happiness. That's not the sister I want to be. You don't need to apologize for grieving, I told her. You just need to get help processing that grief in healthier ways. As we drove home, Kate was quiet for several minutes before speaking. That could have been me, you know. If I hadn't had the support of my parents, if I tried to keep you and failed at providing what you needed, I might have ended up just as angry and broken. Do you think she'd be okay? I think she'd be okay if she gets the right help and if she can separate her worth from her reproductive capacity. But it's going to take time, and it's going to require her family to stop defining her by her ability to produce grandchildren. That afternoon, I called my mother. Mom, we need to talk about Claire. She had a breakdown last night, and part of it was about the pressure she feels to be the biological daughter who carries on the family line. Is she all right? She will be, but she needs our support. And she needs you to stop making comments about when she's going to give you grandchildren. She needs to know that her value to this family isn't dependent on her reproductive success. There was a long pause. I never meant to put that kind of pressure on her. Maybe not intentionally, but the message has been clear for years. Claire is valuable for what she can produce, and I'm valuable for what I can provide. Neither of us has been valued just for who we are. That's not true, Rosalyn. We love you both for who you are, then prove it. Stop asking Claire about babies. Stop making comments about carrying on the family name. Let her find her own path to happiness, even if it doesn't include biological children, and if it doesn't include children at all. Then you love and support her anyway, because that's what real parents do. That evening, Claire called to thank me for coming to help her. I'm going to start seeing a therapist twice a week, she said. And I'm going to look into that support group you mentioned. I think it's time I learned how to be happy for other people without it feeling like a personal attack on my own dreams. I'm proud of you, I told her. It takes courage to ask for help, Ross. I want you to know that I am happy about your pregnancy. Under all the pain and jealousy, I really am excited to be an aunt. I want to be the kind of aunt who shows up for your kid, who's present and loving and supportive. You already are that kind of person, Claire. You just need to learn to see it in yourself. The following Monday, I did something I had never done in my entire career. I requested a meeting with my supervisor to discuss personal boundaries at work. The conversation with Claire had made me realize that I'd been allowing people to define my worth by my usefulness for far too long, and that pattern extended beyond my family relationships. "Rosalyn, you seem different lately," said Linda, my charge nurse. "More assertive, maybe?" "I'm not saying it's a bad thing, just different." "I've been doing some reflecting on boundaries," I said carefully. "I realize I've been saying yes to extra shifts, holiday coverage, and additional responsibilities without really considering whether it's sustainable long term." "Are you planning to cut back on hours because of the pregnancy?" "I'm planning to work a normal 40-hour week instead of the 50 to 60 hours I've been averaging. I'm planning to take my vacation days instead of cashing them out. And I'm planning to stop automatically volunteering for every difficult assignment just because I'm good at handling challenging situations." Linda looked surprised. For 5 years, I had been the nurse everyone could count on to pick up the slack, to work the holidays nobody wanted, to take on the most demanding cases without complaint. "Is everything all right at home?" "You seem to be under some stress. Everything is actually better than it's been in years. That's exactly why I want to maintain better boundaries, so I can preserve the positive changes I've been making in my personal life." That week, I practiced setting boundaries everywhere. When my mother called to ask if I could help her organize a church fundraiser, I politely declined. When a colleague asked me to cover her weekend shift so she could attend a wedding, I suggested she find coverage elsewhere. When my father hinted that I should consider having the baby baptized at their church, I explained that I would make my own decisions about my child's spiritual education. Each no felt revolutionary. For 34 years, I had been the accommodating daughter, the helpful colleague, the reliable friend who could always be counted on to put others' needs before my own. Learning to prioritize my own well-being felt selfish at first, but I gradually began to understand that it was actually healthy. The biggest test came Thursday evening when Claire called, sounding much more stable than she had during her breakdown. "Ross, I have a favor to ask, and I want you to know it's okay if you say no." "What kind of favor?" "David and I are going to a fertility counselor tomorrow, and she suggested we bring someone who could provide perspective on family dynamics. Would you be willing to come?" I know it's a lot to ask, especially given everything that's happened. I thought about it carefully. The old Rosalyn would have immediately said yes, despite the emotional toll it might take. The new Rosalyn considered whether this was something I genuinely wanted to do and whether it would be helpful for all involved. "What exactly would you want me to contribute to the session?" "Honestly, the counselor wants to explore how family secrets and expectations might have contributed to my obsession with biological motherhood. She thinks having you there might help her understand the full picture." "And how do you feel about me being there?" "I think it might be helpful. I think I need to hear out loud how differently we were treated growing up. Not to blame anyone, but to understand how those differences shaped my sense of identity." I realized this was exactly the kind of boundary-setting opportunity I needed to practice. "I'm willing to attend one session as long as we establish some ground rules first." "What kind of ground rules?" "First, this is your therapy, not mine. I'm there to provide information, not to work through my own issues. Second, if the conversation becomes attacking or blame-focused rather than growth-focused, I reserve the right to leave. Third, anything I share in that room stays in that room. It doesn't become ammunition for future family arguments. Claire was quiet for a moment. Those are really reasonable boundaries. I agree to all of them. Then yes, I'll come. The next day, I met Claire and David at Dr. Rebecca Santos's office. Dr. Santos was a warm, direct woman in her 40s who specialized in family therapy and fertility counseling. Thank you for joining us today, Rosalyn. Claire and David have shared some of their family history with me, and I think your perspective could be valuable in helping them understand how external pressures may have influenced their fertility journey. Over the next hour, I found myself describing patterns I had never articulated before. The way Claire had been consistently praised for her potential while I was praised for my helpfulness. The way our mother had always spoken about Claire's future children as a given while treating my desire for motherhood as optional. The way family gatherings had always centered around Claire's achievements while my accomplishments were noted, but not celebrated. What I'm hearing, Dr. Santos said, is that Claire was raised with the expectation that her primary value came from her ability to continue the family lineage, while Rosalyn was raised to find her value in serving others. Is that accurate? That's exactly right, I said. And what's tragic is that both of those messages are limiting. Claire was never allowed to imagine a fulfilling life without children, and I was never encouraged to prioritize my own needs and desires. Claire was crying softly. I never realized how much pressure I was putting on myself based on what I thought Mom expected from me. And I never realized how much I was accommodating everyone else's needs because I thought that was the only way to earn love and acceptance. I added. Dr. Santos turned to David. How do you see these family dynamics affecting your marriage? I think Claire has been so focused on meeting her mother's expectations that she's lost sight of what she actually wants for her own life. And I think the fertility struggles became about proving her worth to her family rather than about our desire to be parents. Is that true, Claire? Claire nodded. When I really think about it, I'm not even sure how much of my desire for children comes from genuinely wanting to be a mother versus wanting to fulfill the role I was assigned in the family. It was a profound moment of self-awareness, and I felt proud of my sister for being brave enough to examine her motivations honestly. What do you think you need to figure out who you are when you're not performing the role of future mother? Dr. Santos asked. I think I need to take a complete break from trying to conceive, Claire said slowly. Not just a physical break, but an emotional break from the whole project of becoming a mother. I need to explore who I am and what I want when I'm not defined by my reproductive capacity. After the session, the three of us went to lunch together. It was the first time in years that I had spent time with Claire without feeling like I was walking on eggshells around her fertility struggles. Thank you for being so honest in there, she said. I know it wasn't easy to talk about how differently we were treated. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And Claire, I want you to know that recognizing those differences doesn't diminish my love for our parents or my gratitude for the life they gave me. I know, and I want you to know that I'm genuinely excited about being an aunt. Not because it's a consolation prize, but because I think I might actually be good at it. David smiled. You'll be a great aunt. You've always been wonderful with kids. That's one of the reasons you became a teacher. Maybe that's enough for now, Claire said thoughtfully. Maybe I can find fulfillment in being an amazing aunt, an inspiring teacher, a supportive wife. Maybe I don't have to be a mother to be complete. Driving home that afternoon, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. I had learned to set boundaries, to prioritize my own needs, to speak honestly about difficult family dynamics. I had reconnected with my birth family while maintaining my relationship with my adoptive family. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval or expectations. That evening, I wrote a resignation letter, not from my job, but from my role as the family peacekeeper. I was resigning from the position of being responsible for everyone else's emotions, from the job of smoothing over conflicts I didn't create, from the burden of being endlessly accommodating. I didn't send the letter to anyone. It was just for me a symbolic gesture of the changes I was making. I was 34 years old, pregnant with my first child, and finally learning to live authentically instead of performing the role others expected of me. My baby deserved a mother who knew her own worth, who could model healthy boundaries, who understood that love didn't require self-sacrifice. And for the first time in my life, I felt confident that I could be that kind of mother. 2 weeks before my baby shower, David called me with news that I hadn't seen coming. "Ross, I need to talk to you about something, and I wanted you to hear it from me first. Claire and I are getting divorced." I sat down heavily on my couch, shocked. "What?" "But she seems so much better lately. She's been going to therapy, planning the baby shower, applying for the CASA program. I thought you two were working through things." "We are working through things, and Claire is definitely better. But part of her getting healthier has been acknowledging that our marriage became entirely focused on trying to have children. When we remove that shared obsession, we're left with the reality that we've grown into very different people who want different things." "What kinds of different things?" David was quiet for a moment. "Ross, I need to tell you something that I probably should have told you years ago. The reason I knew so much about your adoption, the reason I was so aware of family secrets and dynamics, it's because I've been questioning my place in this family for a long time." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been in love with you for years." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. "David, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that watching you discover your worth, watching you set boundaries and demand honesty, watching you connect with Kate and build authentic relationships, it's made me realize that I want those things too. And I can't have them while I'm married to someone I'm not in love with. But you and Claire, you've been together for 8 years. You've been through so much together. We've been through a lot, but we've never really been partners. We've been co-conspirators in a fertility project. When Claire started therapy and began to figure out who she is outside of that project, it became clear that we don't actually have much in common beyond our shared obsession with having children." I didn't know what to say. The idea that David had feelings for me was completely unexpected, and the timing right in the middle of my pregnancy, right as my family was finally coming together, felt overwhelming. "David, I don't know how to respond to this." "I'm not asking you to respond to anything right now. I'm just being honest about my feelings and my decisions. Claire and I have talked extensively about this, and we both agree that staying married would be unfair to both of us." "How does Claire feel about your feelings for me?" "She says she's known for a long time that I was more invested in your well-being than in hers. She says she's not surprised and she's not angry. If anything, she's relieved that there's a concrete reason for the distance between us rather than just vague incompatibility." "Are you planning to tell our parents about this?" "Not about my feelings for you, that's between us. But yes, we'll tell them about the divorce. Claire wants to wait until after your baby shower, though. She doesn't want family drama to overshadow your celebration." I felt a complex mix of emotions: gratitude for Claire's consideration, confusion about David's revelation, and concern about how this would affect our family dynamics going forward. "What happens now? Where will you live? How will this affect your relationship with Claire?" "I'm moving into an apartment across town next month. Claire and I plan to stay friends. We've been through too much together to just disappear from each other's lives. And I hope I can still be part of your life in whatever capacity feels appropriate. David, I need to be honest with you. I care about you deeply, but I'm not in a position to think about romantic relationships right now. I'm 5 months pregnant, dealing with major family revelations, trying to figure out who I am. Even if I weren't pregnant, the timing would be complicated. I understand completely. I'm not expecting anything from you, Ross. I just needed to be honest about my feelings so I could make decisions based on truth rather than pretense. What will you tell people about why you're getting divorced? The truth that we grew apart and want different things for our futures. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. That evening, I called Claire to check on her. I was amazed by how calm she sounded. Did David tell you about our decision? He did. How are you feeling about it? Honestly, relieved. We've been holding on to our marriage like it was a life preserver, but it was actually weighing us both down. We love each other, but we're not in love with each other. There's a difference. Are you concerned about being alone? Starting over? Claire laughed. Ross, I've been alone in my marriage for years. David was physically present, but emotionally he was already somewhere else. At least now I can be honest about it and figure out what I actually want for my life. What do you want? I want to focus on my career. I want to get really good at the KISA program and maybe eventually work in family law or social services. I want to travel. David never wanted to go anywhere because we were always saving money for fertility treatments. I wanted to date people who were interested in me as I am, not as a potential mother for their children. That sounds healthy. It is healthy. And Ross, I want you to know that David's feelings for you didn't surprise me. I've known for a long time that he was more concerned about your happiness than about mine. I probably should have been jealous, but mostly I was grateful that someone in our family was looking out for you. How do you feel about the possibility of him and me, eventually? Claire was quiet for a moment. I think you two would be good together when the timing is right. You both value honesty and authenticity. You both want to build relationships based on who people really are rather than who you want them to be. But Ross, promise me you won't rush into anything just because you feel sorry for him or grateful for his support. I promise. Good. Now let's talk about your baby shower. I've been working on the menu, and I think I figured out how to accommodate Kate's vegetarian diet and Dad's weird aversion to anything green. We spent the next hour discussing party planning details, and I was struck by how much lighter Claire seemed. The end of her marriage wasn't a failure. It was a liberation from expectations and obligations that had never served either of them well. A few days later, David helped me move some baby furniture into the nursery I was finally allowing myself to set up. As we assembled a crib together, he brought up his revelation again. Ross, I want you to know that I meant what I said about not expecting anything from you. But I also want you to know that my offer of support isn't conditional on romantic possibilities. I want to be in your life and your baby's life because you're family to me. What does that look like practically? It looks like being the kind of uncle who shows up for school plays and birthday parties. It looks like being someone your child can talk to when they're having problems with their parents. It looks like being a friend who you can call when you need help moving furniture or want someone to watch the baby so you can have a night out. And if I eventually start dating other people, then I'll be happy for you as long as they treat you well. Ross, I've spent 8 years watching Claire try to force herself into a role that didn't fit her. I don't want to do the same thing. If we're meant to be together romantically, it will happen naturally. If we're meant to be friends and family, that's valuable too. As we finished setting up the crib, I realized that David's honesty had given me something I'd never had before, a man in my life who valued me for who I actually was, rather than who he wanted me to be. Whether that eventually became romantic or remained platonic, it was a kind of relationship I'd never experienced. David, can I ask you something? Of course. When did you first realize you had feelings for me? He smiled sadly. Probably about 3 years ago, when you got that promotion to charge nurse and Claire barely acknowledged it because she was dealing with her second miscarriage. I watched you celebrate your professional achievement alone, and I wanted to tell you how proud I was of you, but it felt inappropriate given that I was married to your sister. Why didn't you say something sooner? Because I was married, and because I knew you deserved better than being someone's consolation prize. I needed to figure out my own life before I could offer anything genuine to someone else. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the changes happening around me. Claire was discovering who she was outside of her fertility struggles. David was choosing honesty over convenience. My parents were finally acknowledging the full truth about our family. Kate was becoming part of our lives after decades of exile, and I was learning that love could take many forms: sisterly love that grew stronger through conflict, parental love that could survive devastating mistakes, friendship that might someday become something more. My baby would be born into a family that was complicated and imperfect, but finally honest. The divorce papers that would soon be filed weren't an ending. They were a new beginning for everyone involved. The morning of my baby shower arrived crisp and sunny, the kind of April day that promises warmer weather ahead. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, smoothing my hands over the empire waist of my maternity dress, marveling at how much my body had changed in the past few months. At 28 weeks, my pregnancy was unmistakably visible, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud of my body for what it could do rather than critical of it for what it looked like. Doc Kate had arrived the night before, staying in my guest room again. She'd brought gifts from Michael and Sarah, who couldn't make the trip but had sent heartfelt letters expressing their excitement about becoming an aunt and uncle. This morning, she was more nervous than I was. What if your parents don't like me? She asked over breakfast. What if they think I'm trying to intrude on their family? They're going to love you, I assured her. And even if they're awkward at first, remember that this is about celebrating the baby, not about rehashing old grievances. We arrived at my parents' house to find Claire already there, transforming their dining room into a party space. She had outdone herself pale yellow and green decorations, a beautiful cake shaped like a baby bassinet, and carefully planned games that would include everyone without making Kate feel like an outsider. You look beautiful, Claire said, hugging me carefully around my bump. How are you feeling? Excited, nervous, grateful. I looked around at the decorations. Claire, this is incredible. Thank you for doing all of this. Thank you for letting me. It turns out planning parties for actual babies is much more fun than planning them for imaginary ones. My mother appeared from the kitchen, wearing her best dress and looking anxious. Rosalyn, dear, you look lovely. And Kate, she paused, clearly struggling with what to say. Thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to finally meeting you properly. Kate stepped forward and embraced my mother gently. Thank you for raising such a wonderful daughter. I know it couldn't have been easy taking on two babies so close together. Mom's composure cracked slightly. She was such a good baby, so easy, so content. We fell in love with her immediately. I can see why. She's grown into an amazing woman. The first few guests began arriving, my colleagues from the hospital, David's sister and her family, some of Claire's teacher friends. Each introduction was an opportunity to watch my two families blend together. Kate charmed everyone with her warmth and obvious pride in me, while my adoptive family gradually relaxed as they realized she wasn't there to claim me or criticize their parenting. The most emotional moment came when my father asked to speak. Privately with Kate, I watched through the kitchen window as they talked on the back patio, seeing Dad's shoulders shake as he clearly broke down. When they came back inside, both had red eyes but seemed lighter somehow. What did you talk about? I asked Dad quietly. I apologized, he said simply. For keeping her letters from you, for going to court to cut off contact, for 34 years of denying her the right to know how you were doing. She was incredibly gracious about it. What did she say? She said she forgave us years ago, that holding on to anger would have hurt her more than it hurt us. She said she just wanted to be part of your life going forward in whatever way felt comfortable for everyone. The gift opening portion of the shower was surprisingly moving. Kate had brought a hand-knitted baby blanket that she'd started making when I was born and had finally finished after our reunion. My mother had given me her own baby blanket, not the one I'd used as a child, but the actual blanket she had slept with as a baby, which her mother had saved. I want this baby to have something that connects them to both their grandmothers. Mom said, her voice thick with emotion. Claire's gift was the most unexpected. She presented me with a thick scrapbook filled with photos and mementos from my childhood, but also with letters she'd written to me over the years and never given me. I started writing these when I was about 12, she explained. Whenever I was mad at you or proud of you or just wanted to remember something we'd done together. I never gave them to you because I was afraid you'd think they were silly. I flipped through pages of Claire's careful handwriting, documenting our shared childhood from her perspective. Stories about teaching me to ride a bike, about how proud she was when I graduated from nursing school, about how she'd always admired my ability to make friends with anyone. This is the most precious thing anyone has ever given me, I told her, tears streaming down my face. I want your baby to know that their mom was loved, even when our family wasn't great at showing it. Claire said David arrived during the final hour of the party, bearing a gift that made everyone laugh, a baby carrier designed to look like a stethoscope, perfect for a pediatric nurse's child. His presence wasn't awkward, despite the recent divorce news. He fit seamlessly into the group, helping serve cake and engaging Kate in conversation about her work as a nurse practitioner. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing in my parents' living room with the 4 people who had shaped my life the most, my adoptive parents, Kate and Claire. We were looking at a photo that Claire had insisted on taking of all of us with the baby gifts spread around us. This baby is going to be so loved, Kate said softly. They're going to have more grandparents and aunts and uncles than they know what to do with. They're going to know their whole story from the beginning, I added. No secrets, no mysteries about where they came from or who they belong to. Mom spoke up, her voice stronger than it had been all day. Rosalyn, I want you to know that I understand now what we took from you by keeping Kate's existence secret. We robbed you of the chance to know someone who loved you from the moment you were born. We were so afraid of losing you that we nearly lost you anyway, but you didn't lose me, I said gently. I'm still here and I still love you. I just love more people now, and that's a good thing. Dad nodded. We're going to do better with this grandchild. We're going to make sure they know about Kate from the beginning, that they understand they have 2 grandmothers who love them for different reasons, but with equal devotion. And I'm going to be the aunt who spoils them rotten, Claire added. With a grin, I'm going to be the one who teaches them inappropriate songs and sneaks them extra dessert and takes their side when they're teenagers and think their mom is being unreasonable. Kate laughed. And I'm going to be the grandmother who tells them stories about their mom as a baby, who teaches them about their genetic heritage, who makes sure they know that sometimes love means making difficult choices for someone else's benefit. As I drove home that evening, my car loaded with baby gifts and my heart full of gratitude, I reflected on how much had changed since that dinner when Claire had mocked my pregnancy. The woman who had once seen my happiness as a threat to her own had thrown me the most beautiful baby shower I could have imagined. The birth mother who had been erased from my life for 34 years was now going to be an active grandmother. The adoptive parents who had built their family on secrets were finally ready to live in truth. At home, Kate and I spent the evening organizing baby gifts and talking about the future. She would be flying back to Portland in the morning, but we had plans for her to return when the baby was born. Michael and Sarah wanted to visit during the summer, and we were discussing the possibility of me bringing the baby to Portland for Thanksgiving. Today felt like a dream, Kate said as we folded tiny baby clothes. For 34 years, I imagined what it would be like to be part of your life during important moments. Today was better than anything I had imagined. It was perfect, I agreed. And it felt like a beginning rather than just a celebration. A beginning of what? I thought about that for a moment. A beginning of being a family that chooses truth over comfort, that chooses inclusion over exclusion, that chooses love over fear. The next morning, I drove Kate to the airport, both of us emotional about saying goodbye again. But this time, the goodbye was temporary and planned, not the permanent separation it had been for most of my life. I love you, sweetheart, she said. As we hugged at the departure gate, I'm so proud of the woman you've become, and I can't wait to meet my grandchild. I love you too. Thank you for never giving up hope that we would find each other again. That week back at work, my colleagues commented on how radiant I looked, how happy and settled I seemed. Linda, my supervisor, pulled me aside to ask if everything was all right. You seem different since you announced your pregnancy, she said. More confident, more assertive. It's like you've finally grown into yourself. I think that's exactly what happened, I told her. I spent 34 years trying to be who I thought other people wanted me to be. Learning about my adoption forced me to figure out who I actually am, independent of other people's expectations. Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You're glowing. That evening, David stopped by to help me set up the changing table that had been too heavy for Kate and me to manage alone. Our interaction was comfortable and easy, without the tension I had feared after his revelation about his feelings. How was the shower from your perspective? I asked as we worked. It was beautiful. Watching your whole family finally come together, seeing how happy everyone was, it felt like witnessing a miracle. Any regrets about the divorce? David considered the question seriously. None. Claire and I both needed permission to be ourselves rather than the people we thought we were supposed to be. We're going to be better friends than we ever were spouses. And how are you doing with everything else? You mean my feelings for you? He smiled. I'm doing well. I meant what I said about not having expectations. I'm happy to be in your life in whatever capacity feels right to you. Good, because I value your friendship and I want you to be part of my baby's life. I wouldn't miss it. As David left that night, I realized that my life was finally taking a shape that felt authentic, rather than performed. I was 34 years old, 6 months pregnant, and surrounded by people who loved me for who I actually was rather than who they wanted me to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Had lunch with my first Kesa child today. Her name is Maria. She's 8 years old, and she reminded me so much of you at that age, serious, thoughtful, trying to take care of everyone around her. I think I'm going to love this work. I smiled, thinking about how Claire was channeling her nurturing instincts toward a child who desperately needed an advocate. She was becoming the mother she was meant to be, just not in the way anyone had expected. That night, I felt the baby's strongest kicks yet, as if they were responding to all the love and positive energy surrounding them. I placed my hands on my belly and spoke to them softly. Your family is complicated, little one, but they're all good people who are learning how to love better. You're going to grow up knowing where you came from, who you belong to, and how much you're wanted. And you're going to know that family is something you can choose and build, not just something you're born into. The baby settled down as if they were listening, and I felt a deep sense of peace about the life I was creating for both of us. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing in my parents' living room with the 4 people who had shaped my life the most, my adoptive parents, Kate and Claire. We were looking at a photo that Claire had insisted on taking of all of us with the baby gifts spread around us. This baby is going to be so loved, Kate said softly. They're going to have more grandparents and aunts and uncles than they know what to do with. They're going to know their whole story from the beginning, I added. No secrets, no mysteries about where they came from or who they belong to. Mom spoke up, her voice stronger than it had been all day. Rosalyn, I want you to know that I understand now what we took from you by keeping Kate's existence secret. We robbed you of the chance to know someone who loved you from the moment you were born. We were so afraid of losing you that we nearly lost you anyway, but you didn't lose me, I said gently. I'm still here and I still love you. I just love more people now, and that's a good thing. Dad nodded. We're going to do better with this grandchild. We're going to make sure they know about Kate from the beginning, that they understand they have two grandmothers who love them for different reasons, but with equal devotion. And I'm going to be the aunt who spoils them rotten, Claire added. With a grin. I'm going to be the one who teaches them inappropriate songs and sneaks them extra dessert and takes their side when they're teenagers and think their mom is being unreasonable. Kate laughed. And I'm going to be the grandmother who tells them stories about their mom as a baby, who teaches them about their genetic heritage, who makes sure they know that sometimes love means making difficult choices for someone else's benefit. As I drove home that evening, my car loaded with baby gifts and my heart full of gratitude, I reflected on how much had changed since that dinner when Claire had mocked my pregnancy. The woman who had once seen my happiness as a threat to her, Owen had thrown me the most beautiful baby shower I could have imagined. The birth mother who had been erased from my life for 34 years was now going to be an active grandmother. The adoptive parents who had built their family on secrets were finally ready to live in truth. At home, Kate and I spent the evening organizing baby gifts and talking about the future. She would be flying back to Portland in the morning, but we had plans for her to return when the baby was born. Michael and Sarah wanted to visit during the summer, and we were discussing the possibility of me bringing the baby to Portland for Thanksgiving. Today felt like a dream, Kate said as we folded tiny baby clothes. For 34 years, I imagined what it would be like to be part of your life during important moments. Today was better than anything I had imagined. It was perfect, I agreed. And it felt like a beginning rather than just a celebration. A beginning of what? I thought about that for a moment. A beginning of being a family that chooses truth over comfort, that chooses inclusion over exclusion, that chooses love over fear. The next morning, I drove Kate to the airport, both of us emotional about saying goodbye again. But this time, the goodbye was temporary and planned, not the permanent separation it had been for most of my life. I love you, sweetheart, she said. As we hugged at the departure gate, I'm so proud of the woman you've become, and I can't wait to meet my grandchild. I love you too. Thank you for never giving up hope that we would find each other again. That week back at work, my colleagues commented on how radiant I looked, how happy and settled I seemed. Linda, my supervisor, pulled me aside to ask if everything was all right. You seem different since you announced your pregnancy, she said. More confident, more assertive. It's like you've finally grown into yourself. I think that's exactly what happened, I told her. I spent 34 years trying to be who I thought other people wanted me to be. Learning about my adoption forced me to figure out who I actually am, independent of other people's expectations. Well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You're glowing. That evening, David stopped by to help me set up the changing table that had been too heavy for Kate and me to manage alone. Our interaction was comfortable and easy, without the tension I had feared after his revelation about his feelings. How was the shower from your perspective? I asked as we worked. It was beautiful. Watching your whole family finally come together, seeing how happy everyone was, it felt like witnessing a miracle. Any regrets about the divorce? David considered the question seriously. None. Claire and I both needed permission to be ourselves rather than the people we thought we were supposed to be. We're going to be better friends than we ever were spouses. And how are you doing with everything else? You mean my feelings for you? He smiled. I'm doing well. I meant what I said about not having expectations. I'm happy to be in your life in whatever capacity feels right to you. Good, because I value your friendship and I want you to be part of my baby's life. I wouldn't miss it. As David left that night, I realized that my life was finally taking a shape that felt authentic, rather than performed. I was 34 years old, 6 months pregnant, and surrounded by people who loved me for who I actually was rather than who they wanted me to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Had lunch with my first Kesa child today. Her name is Maria. She's 8 years old, and she reminded me so much of you at that age, serious, thoughtful, trying to take care of everyone around her. I think I'm going to love this work. I smiled, thinking about how Claire was channeling her nurturing instincts toward a child who desperately needed an advocate. She was becoming the mother she was meant to be, just not in the way anyone had expected. That night, I felt the baby's strongest kicks yet, as if they were responding to all the love and positive energy surrounding them. I placed my hands on my belly and spoke to them softly. Your family is complicated, little one, but they're all good people who are learning how to love better. You're going to grow up knowing where you came from, who you belong to, and how much you're wanted. And you're going to know that family is something you can choose and build, not just something you're born into. The baby settled down as if they were listening, and I felt a deep sense of peace about the life I was creating for both of us. Labor began at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in early July, 6 days before my due date. I woke to a contraction that was different from the Braxton Hicks contractions I'd been experiencing for weeks. This one had purpose, intensity, and a clear beginning and end. I lay in bed timing contractions for an hour before calling my doctor. They were coming every 8 minutes, lasting about 45 seconds each. Dr. Chun's answering service told me to head to the hospital when they were 5 minutes apart or when I felt I needed medical support. By 6 a.m., the contractions were becoming stronger and more frequent. I called Claire first. It's time, I said simply when she answered on the second ring. Oh my God, really? How are you feeling? Do you need me to drive you to the hospital? I'm okay for now, but yes, I'd like you to drive me. Can you pick me up in about an hour? I'll be there in 30 minutes. Next, I called Kate in Portland. She had been waiting by the phone for weeks, ready to fly down at a moment's notice. The baby's coming, I told her. How soon can you get here? I'm already packing. There's a flight at 9:30 that gets in around 11. I'll take a cab straight to the hospital. Kate, you might miss the birth if labor goes quickly. Then I'll meet my grandchild a few hours after they're born instead of a few minutes. Either way, I'm going to be there. I called my parents next, then David. Within an hour, my support system was mobilizing around this momentous event. Claire arrived looking excited and nervous, carrying a bag packed with snacks, magazines, and a phone charger. How are you doing? Do you need anything? I need to shower and grab my hospital bag. Then I think we should head in. These contractions are getting serious. The drive to the hospital was surreal. I sat in the passenger seat of Claire's car, breathing through contractions while she chattered nervously about traffic and parking and whether we should call ahead to let them know we were coming. Claire, I said during a particularly strong contraction, I need you to be calm. You're making me anxious. Right, sorry, calm. I can do calm. She took a deep breath. How can I help you feel more relaxed? Tell me about Maria. Tell me about your casa work. For the rest of the drive, Claire told me about the 8-year-old girl she was advocating for, how Maria was adjusting to her new foster family, how she was excelling in summer school despite everything she'd been through. Focusing on Claire's Stories helped me breathe through the intensifying contractions. At the hospital, I was admitted immediately and assigned to a labor and delivery room. The nurse, Janet, was someone I'd worked with in other departments, and her familiar face was comforting. "Well, if it isn't our favorite NICU nurse," she said with a grin. "Ready to see what it's like from the other side?" As ready as anyone can be for something they've never done before. Dr. Chun arrived around 10 a.m. and confirmed that I was already 5 centimeters dilated. "You're progressing nicely. Based on how things are going, I'd estimate this baby will be born sometime this afternoon." Kate's plane was delayed and she didn't arrive until 1 p.m. By then, I was 7 centimeters dilated and the contractions were requiring all of my concentration. When she walked into the room, still carrying her small suitcase, I started crying. "You made it," I gasped between contractions. "Of course I made it. I wouldn't miss this for anything." She kissed my forehead and took my hand. "How are you doing, sweetheart? It hurts more than I expected, but I'm okay." "I'm so glad you're here." My parents arrived shortly after Kate, and for a moment, the room felt crowded with all the nervous energy of people who wanted to help but weren't sure how. David had positioned himself in a corner, ready to offer support but not wanting to. Intrude on family moments? "This is a lot of people," Dr. Chun observed gently. "Rosalyn, who do you want in the room for the actual delivery?" I looked around at the faces of people I loved. Claire and Kate, one on each side. My parents seemed slightly hurt but understanding. "We'll be right outside," Dad said, waiting to meet our grandchild. The final phase of labor was intense and transformative. Claire held one hand while Kate held the other, both of them talking me through each contraction with encouragement and love. Kate, with her medical background, helped me understand what was happening to my body, while Claire provided emotional support and reminded me to breathe. "You're doing so well," Kate said, during transition when the contractions were at their strongest. "Your body knows exactly what to do." "I can see the baby's head," Dr. Chun announced. "Just a few more pushes, Rosalyn." At 4:23 p.m., after 13 hours of labor, my daughter entered the world with a strong cry that filled the room with joy. Dr. Chun placed her on my chest immediately, and I was overwhelmed by the intensity of love I felt for this tiny, perfect person. "She's beautiful," Claire whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She looks just like you did in your baby pictures." Kate was crying too, reaching out to gently touch the baby's tiny hand. "Hello, granddaughter. I'm so happy to finally meet you." "What's her name?" Janet asked, preparing to fill out the birth certificate. I had chosen the name weeks ago, but had kept it secret until this moment. "Emma Catherine Williams." Emma for new beginnings, and Catherine for... I looked at Kate with tears in my eyes. "For the grandmother who never stopped loving her." Kate's composure completely broke. "You named her after me?" "I named her after both of her grandmothers, actually. Catherine is your full name, and it was also my adoptive grandmother's middle name. She gets to carry both of your legacies." The next few hours passed in a blur of visitors, examinations, and the surreal reality of being responsible for this tiny person. My parents were smitten with their granddaughter, taking turns holding her and marveling at her tiny features. David was surprisingly emotional, asking if he could be the honorary uncle who teaches her inappropriate jokes and takes her fishing. Claire's reaction was the most moving. When she held Emma for the first time, she looked at her with pure adoration, without any of the sadness or longing I had feared she might feel. "Hi, Emma," she whispered. "I'm your Aunt Claire. I'm going to spoil you rotten and teach you all the things your mom doesn't want you to know yet. And I'm going to make sure you'll always know how wanted and loved you are." That evening, after the initial excitement had settled and most of the visitors had gone home, Kate and I had quiet time alone with Emma, the 3 generations of women grandmother, mother and daughter finally together after 34 years of separation. She's perfect, Kate said, gently stroking Emma's cheek as she slept in my arms. Absolutely perfect. Kate, I want you to know something. I want you to be part of her life in whatever way feels right to you. I want her to know her Portland, grandmother and her half-aunt and half-uncle. I want her to understand her full heritage. Are you sure? That's a lot of complicated family dynamics for one little person. I'm sure. She's going to grow up knowing that families can be complicated and still be loving. She's going to understand that biology matters, but choice and commitment matter more. And she's going to know that she was wanted and celebrated by more people than she can count. Kate smiled through her tears. She's also going to know that her mother is one of the strongest, most loving women I've ever known. Look what you've built, Rosalyn. Look at the family you've created through honesty and forgiveness and courage. As I looked around the hospital room at Kate holding her granddaughter, at the flowers from my parents and cards from my colleagues and gifts from siblings, I was still getting to know. I realized that Emma was being born into exactly the kind of family I'd wished for my entire life. Not perfect, but honest. Not simple, but genuine. Not traditional, but full of love. The little girl in my arms would never wonder where she came from or who she belonged to. She would never feel like she had to earn her place in our family or perform gratitude for being wanted. She would grow up knowing that love multiplies rather than divides, and that families are built through choice as much as through biology. Welcome to the world, Emma Catherine, I whispered to her as she slept. You have no idea how many people have been waiting to love you.